and I think another 90 million for the assist in the rent for the citizens of Philadelphia, the
Got it.
rental assistance. So
And that's once again separate from the
right,
1.4
and
billion.
that'll
Got it.
be less money that the city will have to use out of their general fund
Mm-hmm.
to assist those services. So I think it's very good for the city and for the citizens of the city and the taxpayers.
Now, one thing, okay, the transparency issue, that's always a concern of mine. I think it's overall, it's a good thing. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
overall, I think it's finally, the federal government helping cities and states. You can't get through the pandemic, especially economically, if you're not giving that type of aid to cities and states. But that transparency issue, that still bugs me
Mm-hmm.
because for me, and I'm kind of a stickler for this. I would love to be able to eventually go to, say, phila.gov or I don't know, picapa.org and see, okay, this is how like the way you just explained it,
Mm-hmm.
this is how these monies are being allocated, right? And
That
we never get that from the city of
right,
Philadelphia. Like we're just going to, we'll hear months from now, oh yeah, we spent the $90 million. It's like, we
right,
didn't even know you had $90 million for rental
right,
assistance. And so
right.
it's like, how do we avoid that happening? Because I don't know, city officials might get irritated or irked that they're even being asked for transparency. No, you need to be transparent. You need to just have a
Exactly.
basic breakdown of,
Right.
hey, and a very central location, not hidden behind the website, a
Mm-hmm.
central location, phila.gov, or even, I would even go so far as it, picapa.org, or maybe the city controller's office, or all three,
Right.
basic pie chart breakdowns. Hey, this is where this money is going. And maybe even go a little bit step further and just say, hey, this is if you need rental assistance or you're homeless, this is the number you call to tap into these resources and that money. I would just love to see the city do that. I don't know if that's something that you
Right.
guys are
But
discussing.
it's I mean, once we get, first of all, we don't know what the criteria yet is on
Yeah,
spending and reporting. So
got it.
once the city gets that and we get that, I think we can absolutely do that. We can break it down once we know the exact final numbers,
Hmm.
what goes for what. And then as we've been following the CARES money that they received last year,
Yeah,
we expect to be briefed and submitted as we ask for, we request it, the information of what they're spending and when they're going to spend it by. So there's just no money. If the criteria says that, there's no money left on the table that we have to
right.
return back to the federal government, because that money is needed here in the city of Philadelphia and the school district of Philadelphia.
Right, right. I think that would be. I'm a big advocate for supporting city and state government or local and state government. I'm not a big advocate. I'm not a big fan of like just the average resident not knowing where that money goes, and then we find out months later or a year later that either the money was mismanaged, it was misspent, it didn't go where it was supposed to go, or in the case of CARES Act money, nearly 63% of the money that was set aside for rental assistance ends up in the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections. Like I'm just trying to avoid that happening again, and people are rightfully irritated by that. We don't find out until some, eager reporter suddenly unearths that, oh wow, or happens to have a conversation with a state representative or state senator in the Pennsylvania legislature. Oh yeah, sorry about that, guys, my bad. The money ended up in the Department of Corrections
Mm-hmm.
when it was supposed to be for rental assistance. So I'm just trying to avoid that. I did want to ask you while I got you for a few more minutes, Harvey, the conversation about pilot payments. I don't know if I've noticed a lot more conversation okay, so the mayor back in 2015, when he ran for mayor for his first term, he said, I'm going to try to get pilot payments. That's one of the things he ran on from these major universities, these world-class institutions inside Philadelphia. I'm going to be like Boston, because Boston does it
Right.
with institutions like Harvard. I'm
Exactly.
going to try to get pilot payments for the city of Philadelphia. That obviously did not happen, but I'm starting to see conversations and even hearings on that. Is that something you're also, PICA is looking closely at, or
Well,
do you think that
think
that's something that could happen?
I think the University of Pennsylvania promised 100 million in pilot payments last year
Hmm.
over the course of 10 years. I believe so. That one university stepped up, and we
Specifically, that will go towards the Philadelphia school system. So we
right,
can consider that like a payment in lieu of taxes, like a payment.
right.
We can
That's
consider
what
that a pilot. Okay, got
that's what pilot
it.
payments are in lieu of taxes.
Hmm.
They they'll grant money to the city or to the school district.
Right.
And so I think the administration needs to work on the other universities.
Yeah.
Ask them, if they haven't as of yet, to step up. And just because we're now getting 1.4 billion, that doesn't mean we rest on our laurels and we don't look for every avenue we can to increase the revenues into the city so that we can provide, the services that a poor city like Philadelphia needs to thrive into the future, and become, become a world-class city.
Do taxes come from, or and just for my own edification here, do taxes come from like the medical institutions in the city of Philadelphia? No, those they don't pay taxes either, or they do pay taxes, or what's that look like? What's that situation? Or some of these research institutions that are based in Philadelphia?
Nonprofits don't pay pay real estate taxes, but they pay the wage taxes and those other taxes. Like if the University of Pennsylvania, if on their property they have for-profit businesses such as their store or whatever, then they're going to pay those BERT taxes and other things like that. But because they're tax exempt, they don't pay the real estate taxes.
Got it. No, it's just something because another thing too is Philadelphia world-class academic research center. And so a lot more activity in terms of things like cancer research, neuroscience research. These are kind of like big, continually burgeoning industries in the city of Philadelphia. I just want to make sure Philadelphia people, average residents in the city, get to see the economic benefit of that. Harvey, I got to let you go. This is always a good conversation. We've been talking with Harvey Rice. He's executive director of the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority. Go to PICA, PICA.org. It's a great website, great resources. And you get to see those snapshots of city finances, those monthly reports there at PICA. I highly recommend that, especially for folks out there who say that they're concerned about the state of Philadelphia finances. You should be, particularly if you live in the city of Philadelphia, which is a major city in the United States, and it's a microcosm of the health of other cities throughout the United States. So these are great conversations, very edifying conversations with Harvey Rice we have each month here on Reality Check. Harvey, thanks for your time. Appreciate you. Have a great day.
Enjoy your day.
All right, see you next time. Bye-bye. Okay, let's go ahead and get ready for the next portion of our 10 o'clock hour. Also, don't forget that we are celebrating Women's History Month with the 2021 Level Up contest. So we're going to embark on a 3-city contest. That's Philly, Chicago, LA, and it's going to highlight Black women-owned businesses who are making a difference in their communities. You can nominate yourself or your favorite Black woman-owned business and enter to win a marketing campaign that is valued at $5,000. That's a lot of money for a marketing campaign these days. So the deadline for submissions has now been extended to March 19th, this Friday, March 19th. So check that out and go to wordradio.com for more on the 2021 Level Up contest. So you got it, they're getting busy in Chicago, LA, so we need to make sure that you're getting busy also in Philly as well. There are Black women-owned businesses in Philadelphia now, so either you're a Black woman-owned business or you know of one that you continually support, that you have supported through pandemic. So give them an opportunity here, particularly if they're from Philadelphia. Give them an opportunity, because we're doing a little bit of, multi-city competition. So we can definitely step up. We can level up and participate in the 2021 Level Up contest. Let me go ahead and take a break. We are scheduled to talk with Congresswoman Madeleine Dean. It's supposed to be coming up next, and then our roundtable is a little bit later on. But looking forward to talking with Congresswoman Madeleine Dean. If you have a question for the Congresswoman, 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900. Let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Hey, WURD family. Our friends at Amoroso's Baking Company are hiring right now. Amoroso's has been baking the delicious bread in our community for over 100 years, and they want you to join their team today. The old and the young love Amoroso's, and they are hiring right now. Check it out. They offer fair pay and provide health, dental, and prescription plans after 90 days employment. Call 856-754-0355 or visit amorososbaking.com for details.
Small business owners are navigating an evolving small business landscape brought on by coronavirus. However, their resilience is reflected in Bank of America's 2020 Small Business Owner Report, a nationwide survey on 1,000 small business owners, which found that nearly 1/4 of small business owners took steps in 2020 to retool their offerings and/or leverage their resources to support relief efforts in their communities. While many saw an impact in their bottom line last year, small business owners anticipate a strong post-pandemic environment, and 79% believe small businesses will return to be the backbone of the U.S. economy. Inspired by the small business owners facing unprecedented challenges, Bank of America continues their commitment to help small business owners in Philadelphia with the necessary resources to sustain and grow. For more information, visit bankofamerica.com.
The Black Words Book Club. WURD Radio's new monthly conversation on books that explore the African American experience through social, economic, and environmental justice issues. Tune in the second Tuesday of every month on Evening Words with Nick Taliaferro, 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. For April, WURD Radio is partnering with the Free Library of Philadelphia and showcasing their pick for its annual citywide reading program, One Book, One Philadelphia, entitled The Tradition by Jericho Brown. Be sure to listen live, as Nick Taliaferro will hold a contest for a giveaway book bundle that consists of 4 titles from Kensington's Defina's Authors of Color's newest release. Don't miss it. Tuesday, April 13th on Evening Words with Nick Taliaferro. Attention for WURD members. Get your copy and receive a 20% discount when you purchase at Harriet's Bookstore or Hakeem's Bookstore. For more information on the Black Words Book Club, visit wordradio.com. The Black Words Book Club is sponsored by Defina. Defina is an imprint of Kensington Publishing Corporation, America's independent publisher, concentrating on authors of color.
Reality check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and wordradio.com.
Okay, welcome back. We have joining us now Congresswoman Madeleine Dean. She serves the 4th Congressional District of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Go to dean.house.gov for more information on your Congresswoman. Locally, she is her Glenside District office is at 215-884-4300. Norristown is 610-382-1250. She joins us now on WURD TV by Skype, and we talk with her occasionally to see what's happening on and off Capitol Hill. Congresswoman, good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me again. It's always my pleasure to talk with you, Charles.
Excellent, excellent. Real quick, just in the mood on Capitol Hill, because I'm hearing more conversation. Some people feeling more uncomfortable with, mostly Republicans, I notice, ironically, feeling a bit more uncomfortable about the major presence of security, particularly National Guard and the fencing around Capitol Hill. That's still there. The presence of troops will be there for another few months at least. So does it make you feel uncomfortable, or do you feel like it still warrants the situation inside and, the political tensions there and also outside of Capitol Hill? Does it warrant that level of security still?
Well, nobody likes that kind of fencing and razor wire around what should be everybody's house. So I'm sad, frankly, every time I arrive and you have to pass through that. But I will say that until we fully understand what happened and the safety or security threats, I'm very thankful for both Capitol Police and the National Guard. I've had the chance to talk to some members of the National Guard from my district. We're very appreciative, but certainly we don't want that fencing up forever. We had a briefing, I don't know if you're aware, but we had a briefing, members briefing, bipartisan, by General Honore and the entire bank of really talented generals who got together and did about a 1 month study, 5-week study of what happened Where were the failed communications? Where were the infrastructure failures? Where was the manpower, man and woman power failures? And they came up with some very important recommendations. And specifically to the fencing, they made a recommendation of this fencing being very temporary, an interim type of fencing that would be retractable, and ultimately an infrastructure that would be built and drop into the ground, kind of like the gates that you see in driveways,
Right.
but so that we can get back to a much more open campus.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder about that too. I just remember just years ago being in Israel, and they have high level of security that they maintain all the time because the country's sort of in a state of war. But you don't see that kind of fencing all over the place. You do see soldiers and, the occasional armored personnel carrier here or there, but it's sort of blended in to the character of different cities in Israel, whether that's Jerusalem or Tel Aviv or elsewhere. Could we see that level or layer of security protection in the nation's capital, you think, without all the fencing, without all the, just the very noticeable and, some people say like really gaudy and, horrific signs of security all over the place on Capitol Hill? I never see that. I never saw that fencing around the Knesset, for example, which is the Israeli parliament. I
really hope not, Charles. But, as you and I have talked, that January the 6th is still, in my mind, an absurdity, a violent attack on the Capitol on a joint session of Congress with the vice president present. And the attack was by Americans on Americans. So for those who say, let the guard go, pull the fencing down, I get that. I want that. But until we fully understand what happened to us, I think it'd be foolish to just say, everybody go on home now, nothing to see here. But I, like you, I do not want us to look like a militarized zone ever.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Let's go into pandemic relief, Congresswoman. So the Commonwealth, the state of Pennsylvania, projected to receive about $14 billion. We're going to get like $1.4 billion between Philadelphia City and Philadelphia County. I was just talking to the executive director of the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, who kind of given a breakdown of that. But I did see one report saying the state will probably get $18 billion and then a separate $9 billion to local governments. I'm just a little bit confused here. What's the formula for determining how much money each of these states and also municipalities will be getting from the American Rescue Plan?
That's a great question. I don't have that specific calculation, but what I've been able to follow as we were promoting this legislation was direct aid to Pennsylvania, to the state, to state and local governments, direct aid to that will come to our school districts, importantly. And so as the bill passed, the estimates that I have for Pennsylvania are somewhere in the area of $14 billion.
Okay.
And so to Montgomery County, to Philadelphia County, each county is going to get per capita and based on ratios that I don't have those at my fingertips. I can try to get them for you. But what's important, I have to tell you, Charles, I'm so excited about that legislation because of its ambition. The breadth of it, the volume of it, the diverse kinds of health. Number one, it's about getting vaccines in arms. We are on the brighter side of this pandemic. I think it was just a year ago that the shutdown took place. We had no idea what was in store. But these are dollars to get the vaccine distributed and in arms. And excuse me, just one second. Could you?
No, sorry.
Oh, sorry about that. Little noise in the background here.
It's all right. No, you were good.
But then also to get checks to families, to individuals, to working class people. One of the things I really appreciate about this bill is its focus is at the bottom, those hardest hit by this pandemic. We're actually going to cut child poverty in half, is what is estimated by these checks for children and for families. To be able to work on the issue of poverty, to be able to work on the issue of hunger, instead of what we saw in the last administration, their monster bill of a similar size was for a tax cut for the wealthiest of folks.
Right.
So between individual checks, rent assistance, mortgage assistance, small business assistance, minority and women-owned business assistance, I'm just delighted.
Yeah, no, there's a big contrast there. in terms of what this bill is trying to do, and with last time when they were doing like a near $2 trillion package, it was just tax cuts. The $1.4 billion that the city of Philadelphia is looking at. Well, Congresswoman, before I ask that, let me just get a real quick question in from Joyce out of Frankfurt, who'd love to talk to you here on Reality Check. Joyce, how are you doing?
Good morning, Charles, and good morning to you. Yes. I just want to ask a question, might be a little outside of the box. I would like to ask, when they had the hearing a few weeks ago on reparations, why would they have somebody like a Herschel Walker, the panelist at the hearing, and why when reparations is talked about is always both sides? I would like that Congresswoman, to answer that question. Thank you, Charles.
So it's a good question. There was a hearing on H.R. 40, and I know you've signed on to co-sponsor that, Congresswoman. The entire Philadelphia delegation has. But if you can offer some insights on that, people do wonder, because everyone knows the generations-long impact of slavery and on the descendants of the enslaved. So I just want to get your thoughts on why is that? Why is it always a both sides conversation?
That's partly custom, but it's also a good practice. I did sign on to that study, and I'm so pleased with Sheila Jackson-Lee, the chairwoman of the subcommittee, who has been a champion for that. And so we have a minority party that is allowed to invite witnesses. That's one of the reasons why that happens. And so we allow voices from non-supportive voices, let me put it that way, of the legislation, so that there can be a fair hearing. That doesn't mean that voice should outweigh the merit of the legislation, but I appreciate the caller's question, and I'm just delighted that we're actually having these conversations about systemic racism, about the economic divide that is based in bigotry and slavery and the historic robbery, frankly, of people of color. So I understand why the caller would be not pleased with that, but it is an attempt to air other opinions so we get at the best solutions.
I'm real curious too, Congresswoman. Do we have any sense of, or do you have any sense, and we haven't yet had an opportunity to talk with Congresswoman Jackson-Lee. I'm sure at some point in the future we will. But do you know if H.R. 40 will pass through the House anytime soon? I'm skeptical about its chances of getting through the Senate, but I just am curious to see whether or not H.R. 40 can pass the House.
Well, it is in the Judiciary Committee, committee I sit on, and I believe it will be on the calendar, but I don't have a date for you. Got it.
No, I know it's something we'll be looking at and checking up on. So going back to the question regarding pandemic relief, the big question for me here is making sure cities and states are very transparent about how they use this money, and that monies aren't being abused, and that they're being used for pandemic-related relief. How do we ensure that? What are some of the, strings that Congress is attaching, that the administration is attaching to this money to make sure that cities and states are being very transparent? Because there was a lot of money lost. Like in Pennsylvania, they lost 63% of rental assistance dollars, Congresswoman, were lost that was supposed to go to rental assistance. It went to the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections instead. And I'm just trying to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Well, to your point, there's oversight to be done at the state level, but also we're involved in oversight at the federal level. So many of the committees in the U.S. House have oversight capability, and we have an oversight committee. And you and I talked about this before. Speaker Pelosi set up a special committee that Whip Clyburn is in charge of, and they have had hearing after hearing, making sure that the dollars we pass are going where they're supposed to go. And they are uncovering irregularities and I don't want to say misappropriation in terms of the legal term, but funds going where they were intended. It's also important so that with each piece of new legislation, it is revealed where did the old money go, or has it not yet been spent? So individual committees have oversight responsibility. We literally have an oversight committee, and we have the special committee. At the state level, we're on calls every week with the administration, for example, on the issue of vaccines, on the issue of schools, and the important dollars that are going to be going to schools. I'm sure you saw the stimulus aid to local schools as listed in the Inquirer. It's exciting to me to see districts in my school districts in my district getting really desperately needed education dollars for our students to get them back in school safely and up to speed. So you're absolutely right. We have to do really robust oversight.
Yeah, that's going to be real important. We were talking with Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, 4th Congressional District. Go to dean.house.gov for more information there on how to get in touch with the Congresswoman, particularly if you're in her district. Many in the WURD listening area, also in the 4th Congressional District. That's one of the reasons we bring her on, dean.house.gov. She also sits on the House Judiciary Committee. She was a House impeachment manager during, especially particularly more recently, the second impeachment trial of the previous president. And so every now and then we get her here on Reality Check, WURD. Congresswoman, always a pleasure seeing you. Looking forward to the next time.
Thank you for having me again. Have a good day.
All right, you do the same. Be safe. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back on the other side, let's just go ahead and keep phone lines open until we head into the 11 o'clock hour. We're actually going to do our roundtable. Our Monday roundtable session is going to be in the 11 o'clock hour. 215-634, made a little adjustment there because we wanted to make sure we get the Congresswoman on. 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900. Phone lines remain open. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
WURD Radio celebrates Women's History Month with the 2021 Level Up Contest. Join us as we embark on a 3-city contest that will highlight Black women-owned businesses who are making a difference in their communities. You can nominate yourself or your favorite Black woman-owned business and enter to win a marketing campaign valued at $5,000. Level Up is a joint production of WURD Radio in Philadelphia, WVON in Chicago, and KJLH in Los Angeles. These 3 Black-owned stations are joining forces to host a historic, interactive, and multimedia contest spotlighting Black women-owned businesses in Philly, Chicago, and Los Angeles. The deadline for submissions is March 15th. Philadelphia finalists will be featured in a special 2-hour live on-air pitch party on March 31st, where the Philadelphia winner will be selected. Go to wordradio.com and click on the Level Up banner for more information or to nominate yourself or a Black woman-owned business you love. The 2021 Level Up contest is sponsored by Comcast, Bank of America, PECO, Keystone First, Thomas Jefferson University, and Jefferson Health.
The Mattress Man is a second-generation family-owned mattress specialist business since 1988. Open 7 days a week, located at 7421 Stanton Avenue. The Mattress Man discounts Serta, memory foam, orthopedic, and ComfortTech mattresses every day. You deal directly with the owner, Julian, to ensure you get the best price and best service. The Mattress Man offers same-day delivery on most models to most areas. Ask about the WURD discount. Call 215-424-5550.
Philly Peace in Progress nonprofit organization was started to create a positive change and bring awareness to the growing drug and gun violence in Philadelphia. Philly Peace in Progress is looking for volunteers to make a change with organized programs, mentoring, problem solving, conflict resolution, and more. If you are interested, email Nelson at phillypeaceinprogress.com or call 267-529-7255.
The WURD Radio newsletter, keeping you informed, engaged, and connected. Sign up by visiting wordradio.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page and type your email address under Connect with Us. You'll receive the latest information on WURD Radio, messages from our president and CEO, Sarah Lomax Reese, exclusive articles and multimedia content, and resources. Stay informed with the WURD Radio newsletter. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and wordradio.com.
All right, welcome back. Phone lines are open, 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900 here on reality check. I'm not sure if I shared this recent poll result with folks who are watching closely, particularly at the time we're watching closely the first days of the trial of Minneapolis or former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin in the murder of in the murder of George Floyd. Excuse me. There was this USA Today Ipsos poll that came out last week, and you know, it basically showed a drop in the number of people who are describing Floyd's death as murder. So back in June of last year, that same USA Today Ipsos poll showed 60% of Americans, a clear majority of Americans, who were describing the death of George Floyd as murder. That now has dropped to 36%. So we're seeing like nearly half of Americans, nearly a half drop in the number of Americans who describe that as murder, now saying they're not sure what it was. That's an actual USA Today Ipsos poll. So there's a lot of uncertainty around how the incident is characterized now, apparently. And that's from, you know, obviously it's from a majority of whites who, you know, who when it first happened, when they saw the 8-9 minutes of video, they were absolutely sure that it was murder. They're absolutely sure of what they saw. Now they're not so sure. Last year in June, 4% said they didn't know how to describe it. That number has now climbed to 17% of Americans saying they don't know how to describe what they saw. Now, nearly 2/3 of black people, 64%, view Floyd's death as murder. I do wonder about the other 36% of African Americans, what they think that was, because that's still a significant chunk of black people who have uncertainty around exactly what it was they saw in that video, just according to this poll. But fewer than 1/3 of white people, just 28% of white people feel that George Floyd's death was murder. White people are more likely to describe it instead as the police officer's negligence, quote, negligence, and 33% describing it as negligence on the part of former Officer Chauvin, compared with 16% of black respondents. Americans who have heard at least something about Chauvin's trial say 4-1, 60% to 15% that they hope Chauvin is convicted. So, you know, you do have a majority of folks saying that they hope that he's convicted. And that's 54%, majority of white people feel he should be convicted, and 76% of African Americans feel the same as well. Those are some recent polling results, and kind of gives you some context around the public opinion as this trial ensues. Also, George Floyd's family receiving a very sizable settlement from the city of Minneapolis last week. That news came out. Let me go to Abdul Jabbar out of West Philly, who's calling in for a reality check. Abdul Jabbar?
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
I thought you were allowing the Congresswoman to take questions. She only talked to one person. I called because I wanted to ask her a question.
Right, she had to go. So yeah, no, we were allowing that. It's just that by that time, the time it went up. So one person had called in, and so I apologize for that. It was just a time thing. So we had her on we only had her for 20 minutes, and so Joyce called in, and you know we didn't, and then we ran out of time before we could take other calls.
Okay, well let me just get right to it. You know, the reality is this: when we ask Congress people, senators, questions about reparations,
right,
one thing I'd like them to be clear on is, and transparent about, what is the United States government giving to the survivors of I think Hiroshima. I'm sorry. Was that Hiroshima, the bombing?
No, I heard not Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but I don't think there were. I know about reparations to Japanese Americans who were jailed in internment camps during World War II.
I'm sorry. So I got that wrong. Okay, the other one is, what are we giving, what does the United States of America, how much do we contribute to Holocaust survivors, and why? And also, from Agent Orange victims from Vietnam War. You know,
many of them black, yeah.
But the majority of the people that America gives money to are Vietnamese. So what I'm saying is, when we look at that, and Charles, I'm just putting it out there. If you can do some research and find out, all right, we're giving these funds to these peoples and these groups based off of these atrocities that America had a hand in. Well, everyone realizes that there were Africans, because they you know, like, I didn't appreciate how she said people of color. There were African people that were brought to America, enslaved, forced into servitude. As a direct result of that, now we have this issue where people are trying to figure out who's a foundational black American, who's a product of the diaspora. African people, they were slaves, and their children are byproducts of that crime because they were on this soil, and as a direct result of that, their children were born here, so on and so forth. But that's just my spin on it. And, you know, in Cobra, they're much more equipped to handle a situation and question like that. But I learned a lot listening to them and you know, going to their meetings. I felt that pressure on her, and it wasn't appropriate. To be honest, she wasn't prepared for that. That wasn't appropriate. But since the door was open, I was going to see if she could give us a little bit of insight on that.
Yeah.
But anyway,
So I mean, you know, it's just like next time, you know, it was just purely a timing issue, and just you were late on the call. But no, you're right. The question should constantly come up. You know, as far as like reparations to Holocaust victims, you have other countries like Germany, Austria, for example, giving direct payments to Holocaust victims. The U.S. supporting, you know, making sure or ensuring that those, which is right, that should be the right. Yeah, 7 million people died from, you know, the horrific policies of the Third Reich at the time. So that should have happened. It should have happened in terms of the Japanese internment camp. I don't want to compare tragedies or these genocidal moments in American history, I mean, throughout world history. So, I mean, that should have right. But now, yeah, it's now time to explore and get the actual figure. And that's the purpose of HR 40. You get that commission, because I have not seen that authoritative figure, that big figure where that receipt that shows, okay, well, if there was a full reparations package for the descendants of enslaved Africans, of enslaved black people in the United States, what is that exact amount? And so we don't know. I mean, there are different amounts that have been thrown about in different studies. So you got to get that authoritative, that one big authoritative government number that says, okay, well, this is how many trillions of dollars this is going to cost, and this is how we need to also disperse this. And it can't just be direct payments, you know, just folks getting checks, because then you could get the checks, but the checks are going to bounce if the structural racism is still there. So you got to, you know, they won't make any bit of difference, you know, because people get a bunch of checks, you feel happy for a minute, but then the racism, the structural, the institutional racism is still there. So you got to eliminate that. So how do you do this? And I think that that's part of the reparations too. So HR 40, you get the commission to determine that. But now the first step is, okay, it's a very high possibility it could pass the House, got to pass the Senate. How is that done? And that's something I'm real curious about. I have posed that question, like, how does this legislation pass? Because that's the way we're going to be able to determine or compel the U.S. government to participate or to create or craft a reparations package for the descendants of the formerly enslaved. You got to pass it through this process. And a big hurdle right now is the Senate. When she says people of color, and I've heard other people say that too, people of color, when they talk about reparations, there's some political theory in that suggesting that, well, the way to get a reparations package is, you know, potentially, I'm not saying this, I'm just saying that conversation's out there. Well, then you have to kind of team up with other groups to get that reparations package, even though, you know, you could still have separate reparations for black people, but in order to make it like politically, to get more momentum, on that to get it passed, to get the votes. That's something that I'm just saying, like, brace for that. Like, don't be, and just kind of ask yourself, okay, are we going to reject a reparations package if that happens, if that comes up? Because that's what I'm told. Let me go to John out of South Jersey. That conversation is there. Let me go to John out of South Jersey, who's calling in for a reality check. John?
Good morning, Charles.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, WURD family. I'm the guy, I used to bug you last year to give us the numbers of shootings along with the numbers of the murders in Philadelphia.
Right.
I have a request for this year. Maybe every once in a while you could give us the numbers on Chicago and Detroit. Because I heard that last night or yesterday there were 15 shootings in Chicago. And we need to open our eyes on while we're exterminating ourselves. We used to have a joke in the 60s. If you got caught for shooting an N-word, they give you $500 and tell you to go shoot another one. And there's many a true word spoken, in a joking fashion. And Reverend Al says that George Floyd killing was lynching by Nick, and I kind of agree with that.
Yeah.
That's it for today. You have a good day.
You're saying I think Chicago homicides are the highest they've been in 4 years, and the same is happening. You're saying that in Detroit. I don't know the exact numbers just yet, but I will get those numbers. I appreciate that. I appreciate the question too, and I will. In addition to looking at Philadelphia, Philadelphia right now is at 100. It has hit the 100 mark in the number of homicides in 2021. That's 32% above where the city of Philadelphia was last year. It was 76 homicides at the same time last year. And we're seeing that, and I appreciate that question, John. We are seeing sharp increases in homicides all over in all the major urban centers and urban cores. And many people are telling me that they have not seen this level of violence since the 90s. People are going, and we are not having it. Like, we're just not having this national community-wide conversation about spikes in violence and what to do about it. Or even going a little bit deeper into the question John asked, like, why are so many of us killing so many of us? It's a valid question. And I know it's a question that makes people feel uncomfortable, but we're going to have to tackle it, because if we don't, other people outside of the community will tackle it for us, and will tackle it in very unpleasant ways, because we're not having the conversation. We're not taking that conversation head on. Not in a big, and we're going to have to do it. Yeah, we have to have like those localized, like citywide conversations, like in a city like Philadelphia that's distressed. But we're going to need a big national community. Like, I don't see it happening. I don't see any cover. I've actually, and I'm not going to name these publications just yet, but I've even offered to write about, in major national black publications, I've offered to write about, hey, like, listen, because we're seeing it. You see it in other publications, other news outlets, where they're saying, yo, there's these big spikes in violent crime that we haven't seen since the 90s. And you know what happened back then when that happened, right? This is a big problem. We had saw signs of it flashing before pandemic. It got worse. It got aggravated during pandemic. And those pictures just reject it. Like, black media nationally and the black community nationally, just refusing to have that conversation, about the condition of public safety in our communities and our neighborhoods, and how it is deteriorating fast, rapidly. Just refusing to have it for all sorts of reasons. Some reasons I'm privy to, and others I just don't understand. And so, you even have, like, we'll talk about all other sorts of issues. We'll talk about things like, the Grammys last night, and but we won't talk about the high number of black people, especially black men, who are getting killed on the streets of these major urban centers every day. Like, we're not having that. It's not an urgent, and we're not having a big urgent planning conversation. So, we could end up, making a repeat of what happened back in the early 90s, and coming up with something like a 1994 crime bill, right? And so I'm trying to avoid that and trying to, nudge people to have that conversation, and people are just ignoring it at their own peril. All right, let's. Thanks, John. I appreciate that question and that conversation. Let's take a break, and when we come back on the other side, we're supposed to go into our roundtable edition. We've got G.S. Potter and David Love coming up on tap here on Reality Check 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURDradio.com, WURD TV, WURD app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Temple University, Philadelphia's public university, is committed to meaningful change that resonates throughout our community. We are investing more than $1 million in anti-racism education and programming, including creating a center for anti-racism research, developing a bridge program for high school students in North Philadelphia, and expanding our Department of Africology and African American Studies, which is the first in the country to offer a doctoral program. Our students are the next generation of innovators and leaders championing a better tomorrow.
Family Therapy Vignette Moments with Dr. Lucille Ijoy.
Can you believe that you have 10,000 gifts? Maybe the pandemic slowed us down a bit to explore our gifts from God. Remember, we are whole persons, physical, intellectual, social, and spiritual. Yes, physical, intellectual, social, and spiritual. Discuss this healthy talk with your family and friends. Play some funky music. Pat your feet with joy. James Brown will do it. I feel good. And Papa's got a brand new bag, Night Train. Remember, try counseling or therapy to help in exploring your 10,000 gifts from God. When have you thought about this? A pandemic time from a loving God. Oh, you want to talk about your 10,000 gifts? Call me.
This is not a fad for us.
We will not resume our regular programming when things die down. We're not black to help our bottom line or because it's politically correct. We're not joining a fight. This has been our fight, our message, our people. Black lives have always mattered here. We are
Undeniably,
indefatigably, unapologetically, permanently Black Talk Media.
WURD.
Livelihood, WURD Radio's new initiative, connecting Black Philadelphians with jobs, entrepreneurship resources, small business development information, and financial literacy tools. Tune in to WURD Radio for our weekly livelihood segments and every weekday show. For a full schedule, visit WURDradio.com/livelihood. For more information on livelihood, visit WURDworks.com. That's WURDWORKS.com.
Lifting every voice till earth and heaven ring. This is WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD Philadelphia. Black Talk Media. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDradio.com.
Okay, welcome back. We've got our roundtable edition. It is at a different time right now this week because we just wanted to bring on Congresswoman Madeline Dean earlier, so we just shifted the schedule a little bit. We've got joining us now for a roundtable session, David Love, a regular contributor, teaches media at Rutgers, also regular contributor to a number of publications, outlets, CNN.com, Al Jazeera, Atlanta Black Star, EcoWord.com occasionally, and other places. Go to @DavidA.Love. Regular contributor here on Reality Check WURD. He's joining us by Skype on WURD TV, and joining us by phone is Dr. G.S. Potter, contributing editor for the BEnote.com. She actually recently wrote, it's up now at the BeNote, THEBENote.com. The name of that piece is The Beginning of the End of Civil Rights. That's right, that's the title. She wrote that. It's a great read. It's an essential read, The Beginning of the End of Civil Rights. Let's get to it. David, Dr. Potter, how are you both doing?
Doing well. Good to talk to both of you.
Excellent, excellent. Dr. Potter, we have you?
Yep, you got me.
All right, excellent. Cool. David, I'm going to start with you, and then I want you to chime in on this, Dr. Potter, because I was just thinking about it before we came into the roundtable session. Violence. And I'm not talking about extremist violence or domestic violence, terroristic violence that we saw attack the Capitol on January 6th. All the major cities, all the major metropolitan areas are dealing with very high spike, the types of violence that we have not seen since the early 90s. And we know what happened back then. I don't know what's going on, David. Like, I do not see a national conversation from, now maybe this station right here, this outlet talks about it every day because the violence is hitting Philly hard. Like nationally, people refuse to bring this issue up. Like it has to be brought up in the same vein that other issues like police violence, criminal justice reform, or even vaccine. Like we have, or reparations. Like we need to be having that same high-pitched conversation about this violence that is like really hitting our communities hard right now. And I'm just worried that because nationally we're not having that conversation, we're going to allow other, like we did before, we're going to allow other people to answer it for us. And people are not going to like the results. What's going on? What do you think's happening, David? Why aren't we having, like, I don't see trending conversations on Twitter from Black Twitter about, hey, y'all, like, this violence is getting out of control. Like, I can't step out the house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Charles, I mean, you really raise an important issue. And I think that if we were looking at a situation where white people were killing Black folks, there would be more outrage. Yeah. That's not to discount the important work that people have been doing in the community around gun violence for years. But It is true, though, that you don't see the sense of urgency. And I think it's important for the Black community to view gun violence as the public health crisis that it actually is. Yeah. The fact of the matter is that, it's no accident that at a time of the pandemic where you have this massive economic oppression, you're also seeing this spike in gun violence. And I don't think that it's accidental. I mean, the fact that the city of Philadelphia, which we know has the most poverty of any large city, also has the least amount of people with education, college education. That's all interrelated. And I believe that we have to really take a look at the violence in this country, the unresolved violence over the years, and the trauma that our communities are going through, and how all of that is manifested in gun violence. It's an important issue, and we have to make sure that it's on the front burner.
Yeah, we really do. I think that's one of the reasons why it just feels like it's not. And I've seen nationally, like I know it's on the front burner in a place in Philadelphia, right? But nationally, we need like all the cities connected having the same conversation and on the same page, before we have some really undesirable policy outcome, or suddenly you have the policymakers shifting to that tough on crime or repeating that tough on crime conversation, because that will happen, right? And so, so GS, I wanted you to weigh in because it's the same thing with like the House passing last week 2 major bills on background checks, gun control bills, background checks for people who purchase guns. Nothing about the assault weapons ban. Like that, to me, that's where like, that's gravy. Like if you really want to see, like if you really want to get extremists where it hurts, start with something much more bold like a assault weapons ban. But Democrats avoided that. Democrats have been avoiding that since 2019. An all-out assault weapons ban like we had back from 1994 to 2004. But, when we're talking about white guys, heavily armed white guys, mass shooting people, it's not a priority to do an assault weapons ban, but it probably will be a priority, right, for an assault weapons ban once the perception is out there that too many Black people have guns and are roaming around major metropolitan areas, spiking up violent crime. That's when we're suddenly probably going to get an assault weapons ban.
Right. Well, that's the trick of the whole game, right, is that nothing will be done unless the solution means we get to lock up more Black people. And that's kind of the game that we have to get around. And we can't take away white folks' toys, right? There's a huge mismessaging opportunity here. Like I remember the 90s when they started putting bans on those bullets that exploded because they were worried so much that the criminals were going to overpower the police officers. So, I mean, I feel like there could have been, and when we weren't in bizarro world, an opportunity to message about, how we have insurrectionists and white supremacists organized to take over the Capitol, to take over local governments, and we need to make sure that we have the assault rifles out of their hands. And then I'm also concerned that summer's coming up, and since everybody's relaxing all their CDC guidelines, they're not following them, we've had a year where we really haven't seen as much public congregation as we're used to. So I think with the rise in people gathering, there's going to be a rise in, mass shootings like we were seeing before the pandemic hit, and actually the numbers are still going up now. But I think there's a couple reasons why we're not talking about it. One is because the mainstream media is too busy doing stories on people like Stacey Dash and their career after the Trump administration to actually do hard-hitting stories. Another one is that, again, we don't know how to talk about it unless it's about blaming a black person for the problem. And we need to bring a new narrative in that does include exactly what David was talking about, that it is a problem of education, of opportunity, of poverty. All those things have been exacerbated. All the pressures, the environmental pressures, that exacerbate gun violence have been really put on top of our heads over the course of the pandemic. And then the other thing that we need to talk about is white supremacists infiltrating the police department. So they're both not doing their job. They're allowing organized crime groups that, the ones that are pushing the guns and the drugs and the industries that push the gun violence onto communities in a lot of areas. They're not doing their jobs in terms of handling their friends. So we have a really layered problem, and we need to have a really multifaceted attack simultaneously on all those levers if we're going to push our narrative forward and, like you're saying, not let it turn into another thing where there's another 1994 crime bill passed.
Yeah, some very good points right there. No, David, go ahead, jump in, chime in. GS making some real good points. The need for that, and going back to what you were saying too, the need for that multi-layered, multifaceted conversation. I guess that's why we're not seeing that sense of national urgency yet, or it reached the fever pitch where, just as a whole, as a community, as a whole community, as a nationwide community, I think people just feel a little bit awkward having that the GS said something that was really important. It's having this conversation without blaming black people primarily for it, right? Or the only time we have the conversation is when it's about blaming black people primarily for it, right? I guess, and so people feel awkward how they lunge into that conversation. I don't even like using, I think it's still a very just sort of clumsy terminology or phrasing to use, like black on black crime. I don't think that, I think there's, it lacks facts, because it removes the context of the conditions that lead to all this. But go ahead, David.
That's right, yeah, because the fact is that black people do not actually manufacture these guns. They certainly don't bring them into the community. Yeah. And there's a lot that you can look at in terms of the priorities this country has where, our people can't get jobs. We have educational opportunities that are not afforded to us. All of those things, and yet there are always guns around for people to use when they are in a state of trauma and have no hope. So, yeah, there's a lot of racism wrapped into it, and I think especially when we talk about black on black crime, that's an example of the racism that's enveloped in this debate, where there's this effort to try to blame black people for their own oppression. And I think that's why it really has to be attacked as a public health issue, because there's a lot wrapped up in there in terms of what we're facing and why our troubles are being manifested in so much gun violence.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I want to kind of switch gears here, switch topic. It's a very fascinating topic. I think we need an expanded conversation on this program and other editions to kind of get at the core of it and prompt people to have a better conversation and a more actionable conversation around it. I did want to, just want to go back to you. I saw this peculiar statement from Texas Governor Greg Abbott. This was yesterday, and he was looking at H.R. 1, and that's what's now been pegged an election reform bill. Are you bothered at all, just that this? Okay, so H.R. 1 was supposed to be about voting rights. And like, there's this all-out nuclear attack when voting rights is happening right now. I mean, big existential that you wrote about it in this Sunday's edition of the B Note, the beginning of the end of civil rights. You know, particularly the Supreme Court votes to, you know, pretty much destroy the Voting Rights Act, or decides to destroy the Voting Rights Act. How did this end up in an election reform bill? Am I the only one that's bothered by that? Go ahead, Gia.
No, yeah, I mean, this is an unpopular opinion, I have found out, but I really think that the Democrats need to start becoming the masters of focus, and stop putting in things that are going to detract from the issue at hand. Like, I'm all for one-line pieces of legislation. Like, I think I was talking to you about it. Like, you want to give everybody $1? Make a bill that says, here's the give everybody $1 bill, and all it says is give everybody $1. And let's make it simple. Let's not give everybody wiggle room, because it's not about election reform. That's a separate issue. Voting rights is definitely a separate issue. So what I wrote about in the B Note was about how this is really connected to the history of the suppression of black folks, of brown folks, of indigenous folks, but especially black folks, because this is about the Reconstruction Acts. This is what got black folks out of slavery. It's what brought the Union together, and it's what's supposed to prevent discrimination today. So the Voting Rights Act, it gets its authority from the Constitution, from the 15th Amendment, and it says you can't discriminate with voting against people of color. So what's at question is the definition of discrimination. And so while it's attacking the Voting Rights Act, these cases in SCOTUS, what they're really attacking is the definition of discrimination. Now, in some cases, you can say discrimination, it has to be based on intent. So like with police reform, with police brutality, with police murder, we don't see cases going to court, and we don't see convictions, because it's very difficult to prove racist intent. Like, so impossible. So that's why we don't see these folks that kill our people being put away. In other areas like education and voting rights, discrimination is a little more loosely defined. Sometimes it's intent, sometimes it's outcome. So right now there's some iffy territory on the 15th Amendment, whether discrimination means a person has to say, I don't want black people to vote, or if they cannot say that, and then the outcome is that black people don't vote. So long story short, this case is about making discrimination in voting about intent, which would make it as difficult to prove discrimination with voting as it is to prove with police brutality. And then that definition, all of the rest of our civil rights are based on the 14th Amendment and the Equal Protection Clause.
Wow.
So that's going to change the definition of discrimination. What they're going to try to do next is take out the definition of discrimination and put intent in there too, and not outcome. Wow. So every civil right, every legal footing we have is just as difficult as police brutality. So that's what we're really looking at with that case.
Yeah, no, and you know, definitely people, when you get a chance, go to thebnote.com to check that out. Do you feel like, and thanks for that primer, GS. David, do you feel like too much stuff was packed into HR 1? And, you know, especially at a time when Republicans are like, through the state legislatures and also through, you know, packing their Supreme Court. Now it's a very conservative Supreme Court. They're gutting destroying the Voting Rights Act. That should have been the focus, I think. But I don't know. I want to get your thoughts on it.
Well, you know, I don't think I'm necessarily troubled by the amount of items that they had in that legislation. I mean, I will say this. I think that there are a lot of good things in there with good intentions.
I agree with that.
You know, trying to get rid of gerrymandering and restrict voter restrictions, automatic voter registration, you know, pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds, things like that. You know, I will say that voting rights is first and foremost our priority.
Yeah.
But I think that if they can pass this, you know, with all of these other great measures, that would be a good first step towards redefining voting and elections in this country. You know, I think about Dr. King when he said that he was troubled that we were integrating into a burning building. Looking at the issue of voting rights, you know, I think that it's important that we have our voting rights restored. But I think one way of looking at it is how good, you know, how valuable are our voting rights if we're still dealing with an electoral system based on white supremacy where Republicans have this advantage as a, you know, minority, but still trying to cling on to power. And you have all of this money in politics, the corruption, which H.R. 1 is trying to address, and all of these other systemic issues with voting. So that's why I think that these are all good things, although I do believe that they're secondary to the issue of voting rights. But I'm thinking that maybe the Democrats figured that they had a very small window because we don't know what's going to go down in the 2022 election. So maybe they figured they'll try to get as many of these reforms through while they're still in power.
Yeah. What do you think about that, GS? And so I, you know, totally agree with you, David. I just feel like, okay, well, could we have, and that goes back to your point, GS, about, well, just introduce separate bills on those issues.
Yeah, I think, so here's the thing with everything. There's a lot of things we need and a lot of really great ideas, and I think a lot of them are going to make it through the House. The question to everything is, you want reparations? You want voting reform? You want money in your pocket? You want food on your table? How's it going to get through the Senate? And I think we don't have 60 votes to get it through the Senate, even if it was just a very simple one-line bill. I don't think any Republicans are going to vote to take away their power to cheat. That's their whole thing, and they've been pretty. We saw with the COVID bill, they're very aligned against this country as insurrectionists. So I think we need to really think. The next questions are: does Schumer use the nuclear option? If we don't get this at the federal level, what do we do at the state level? Is there any way Biden can come out and say, "Hey, you know what? We're going to create an organization on voting rights. We're going to help you make bills for the local level to make sure your local level and all blue counties and states are protected." Like, what can we do at the state and local level when the Senate does reject this? Because I really don't have much hope it's going to make it through the Senate. So I think, you know, despite our needs and despite the moral arguments and our moral side of rightness, what we need to do is strategically figure out how to get through the Senate. And when we can't do that, we have to go really hard and really public back to the states and the localities to get what we need done where we can.
Yeah. We've been talking with Dr. G.S. Potter, contributing editor at the B Note, the B-E Note, THEBENote.com. Check her out. Her latest piece, The Beginning of the End of Civil Rights. It's a great piece. And Professor David Love, in a sense, adjunct faculty at Rutgers University, teaching media journalism. But you see him featured in a number of major publications. Go to @DavidALove to learn on Twitter, on social media, to learn more about him. He's been joining us by Skype, and they've been our roundtablist for this Monday. Always good talking to you both. I got to let you go because we ran on time. But thanks so much.
A pleasure as always.
Hey, all right. Listen, you both be safe out there. Take care. We'll talk to you next time.
All right.
Okay.
Take care. All right, let's take a break. And when we come back, I think we're going to be heading into a Cap Corner. That's coming up next here on Reality Check 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURDradio.com, WURD TV, WURD app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, Her's new fire potato chips and cheese curls, they are spicy. Whew, they're hottest snacks yet. Hold on. Whew. But you know, it's not just heat. There's some nice sweet and savory stuff going on too. Ooh, there's that heat again. It burns, but it burns so tasty. Ooh, that's hot. Find Her's Fire Snacks at your store today. Whew. Taste the flavor, feel the heat, break out the Her's.
As a community service, WURD Radio and the Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium wants to keep you informed about where to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. The Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium offers COVID-19 vaccines and COVID-19 testing for the week of March 14th. No appointment is necessary. Must live in a hardest hit zip code, and you must be Phase 1 eligible. The following vaccinations take place at the Leah Cora Center from 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. Sunday, March 14th, for distribution of the Moderna vaccine only. Monday, March 15th, for distribution of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and the second shot of Moderna. And Tuesday, March 16th, for distribution of the Moderna vaccine only. Stay informed and stay well with WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
The Black Words Book Club.
WURD Radio's new monthly conversation on books that explore the African American experience through social, economic, and environmental justice issues. Tune in the second Tuesday of every month on Evening Words with Nick Taliaferro, 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. For April, WURD Radio is partnering with the Free Library of Philadelphia and showcasing their pick for its annual citywide reading program, One Book, One Philadelphia, entitled The Tradition by Jericho Brown. Be sure to listen live, as Nick Taliaferro will hold a contest for a giveaway book bundle that consists of 4 titles from Kensington's Defina's Authors of Color's newest release. Don't miss it. Tuesday, April 13th on Evening Words with Nick Taliaferro. Attention for WURD members. Get your copy and receive a 20% discount when you purchase at Harriet's Bookstore or Hakeem's Bookstore. For more information on the Black Words Book Club, visit wordradio.com. The Black Words Book Club is sponsored by Defina. Defina is an imprint of Kensington Publishing Corporation, America's independent publisher, concentrating on authors of color.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDRadio.com.
All right, Jocelyn Fry is a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. Go to AmericanProgress.org, and we partner up with to bring you this weekly Cap Corner, these weekly conversations with their experts, with their folks providing us with regular insights on many of the major issues of the day. They're based in Washington, D.C. Once again, go to AmericanProgress.org. Jocelyn, how are you doing? Good to see you.
I'm doing well, thank you. Good to see you as well.
All right, excellent, excellent. So, talking about the impact that the pandemic, especially in particular, has had on Black women, women of color during this pandemic, and in terms of how they look in terms of their wages, how they're looking in terms of employment prospects, lack of employment, loss of employment. What has it been like for Black women? Kind of give us those top line numbers on how the pandemic has economically devastated Black women, especially in terms of wages and employment, and in comparison to other women of color, other racial demographics as well.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. I think, overall, what we should understand is that the pandemic really laid bare problems that we knew existed prior to the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And in particular, the fact that we really don't have the policies in place to help mostly women deal with their caregiving responsibilities. We know in our families, women often do most of the caregiving. We don't have things like national paid family leave, paid sick leave. And so a pandemic that by definition meant that everybody stayed at home who could stay at home, and people were sick and needed care, where you don't have those policies in place, hurt everybody. Black women have really been on the front lines, and they've been on the front lines in a couple of different ways. One is that they have higher rates of unemployment. There's been enormous job loss. It has affected women across the board. They disproportionately have borne the brunt of those job losses, and they've recovered more slowly. It's particularly true for Black women. Their unemployment rate as of February was 8.9%. It is the highest among all women. And so even though it has gone down since the beginning of the pandemic, they are recovering at a slower rate. Yeah. The flip side of that, though, is that Black women are working. They are essential workers, and they have the highest labor force participation rate, almost 60% among women. So even though that has gone down about 7% over the past year, they're still at the highest rate. And I think what it reflects is what we know, is that Black women work. They've always worked. They worked through this pandemic to the extent that they could, and those who may have wanted to stay at home with kids because it was safer, nonetheless couldn't because they were essential workers. They were the grocery store folks, the cashiers, people we just depend on to be there. But they also have borne the economic brunt of this on the job loss side. And so they're really seeing both sides of this pandemic.
Yeah, and Black women have also shouldered much of the trauma that the Black community is going through right now through this pandemic. Talk a little bit about that. And you know, when we have this conversation about how the pandemic has just ripped open, or as you were saying earlier, laid bare inequalities for women across the board. You know, whether it's Black women, white women, Latina women, Indigenous women, et cetera. You know, it's typically it's focused on the stressors and the struggles that middle-class women, or more specifically middle-class white women, have to deal with. You know, having their children jumping around during a Zoom call, you know, because their children are home from school. We don't often see I want to get your thoughts on that, Jocelyn, and it's one of the reasons why it's not being tackled as aggressively or as urgently as it could be. But that national conversation, I mean, are you satisfied that that national conversation focuses in on other women of color? Because you have Black women who are earning 62 cents for every dollar earned by white men, but it gets even worse for Latinas. They earn 54 cents. Indigenous women, 57 cents for every dollar earned by white men. So, but we don't hear those stories enough.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that we don't really have the nuanced, in-depth conversation that we need to have about what's happening to women in the workforce economically, and really all women, not simply white women, but also Black women, Latinas, Asian American women. Even the Asian American women narrative, you know, we like to say that they have the highest rates in terms of earnings. But if you look beneath that, it depends on who you're talking about. If you're talking about women who are Cambodian or Vietnamese or Hmong, then they have actually the lowest wages. So I think this is
it's like they're like the Black women of Asia.
That's
I mean, yes, you know what I mean? It's the way it kind of works out. Yeah, it's like, okay, when we're talking about Asians, yeah, it might be, for say, people from like the more like wealthier, affluent countries in Asia, like China or Japan or Korea. It might seem rosier, but yeah, you're right. The farther south you get, you know, the struggles are much deeper.
It's true, and I think it really has to do with who immigrates to the U.S., quite frankly, and sometimes the countries where the wages here are really low. It's a reflection of folks who are coming from countries that are also sort of experiencing high levels of poverty, and so they come here for a different future. So I think we have that sort of dynamic here in terms of wages. I think the other piece, though, that you're quite rightly pointing out is that the national narrative about women in the workforce has, even though it has shown an important light on the fact that women are leaving, it is still a piece of the puzzle. And the piece of the puzzle that I think you're raising is really a recognition that, you know, I often say when Black women walk into the workplace, they walk through a door through the intersection of race and gender. And so we have to really understand that both of those pieces are impacting their ability to work, their opportunity to work, how their work is valued, and how they're paid. So, you know, the intersection of race and gender, the intersection of race and gender and ethnicity all influence the fact that if you look at Black women, Latinas, and many Asian American women, Native women, they are paid disproportionately less than their white counterparts. I think the other piece of this pandemic that you are, again, quite right to point out is that, you know, the pandemic started in a place of inequity. We have inequality when it comes to how people access healthcare in our communities, you know, to what extent information is disseminated, what sort of resources and supports do people have available in a pandemic that by definition requires a whole breadth of supports just to help people navigate a health emergency. Again, has been revealing over the past year. And the stress that comes from that is enormous. We already know that just the economic stress of people struggling to make ends meet, has physical consequences for people. And, Black women have borne that brunt, but really communities of color have borne that brunt of the pandemic and continue to do so. It's why the relief package that was just voted upon is so important. So I think, as we move forward and think about how we move forward, we have to be cognizant of these layers. It's not just as simple as, give people one check. It's not as simple as saying, well, get kids back in school. The problems that we are experiencing were things that were there before we ever had the pandemic hit our shores, and it's incumbent upon us to fix it.
Last year, you had written a brief, Jocelyn, entitled 10 Actions Employers Can Take to Secure Equal Pay for Black Women. And so go through those 10 steps and how those steps or actions that employers take can be aligned with current public policy, or how public policy can be shaped or crafted to compel employers to do this.
Thank you for mentioning that. I did that product last year in part because in August we celebrate Black Women's Equal Pay Day. And it's noteworthy that we celebrate Black Women's Equal Pay, or recognize it. Celebrate is not quite the right word, in August, because it takes that long for Black women to catch up. Equal Pay Day, the National Equal Pay Day, actually will occur in March this year, in a couple of weeks. So when you look at the national number of 82 cents, that's, the sort of prevailing wage disparity. But when you look at Black women, it's even lower. So it's important for employers to actually think about, how am I correcting not simply the pay gap, but how am I fixing it for Black women? If you're not fixing the pay gap for Black women, then you're not fixing the pay gap. So you really need to be looking close at, not simply your gender gap in your wages overall, but what is it for Black women, Latinas, and Asian American women? Do you have that type of data? What type of analysis are you doing? Are you actually analyzing your pay data on a regular basis and correcting it? To what extent are you doing audits? To what extent are you training your staff on proper pay practices? All of that are pieces of the puzzle. To what extent are you reporting out? To what extent are your salaries transparent? Are you reporting that data publicly? Those are other things. Are you taking away systemic problems like use of salary history? If you base a salary on somebody's past salary, if that person has been paid in a discriminatory manner, then you're just carrying that discrimination forward. So eliminating practices like use of salary history is really important. But there are also pieces like, how many women and people of color do you have in leadership? What we know is that when you have more women in particular at the top, those organizations often do better on some of these policies. So the implications are that, there are a series of things that employers need to do that are attached to both looking at their pay practices, but also looking at their workplace fairness practices to really inject a level of equity across the board.
I'm real curious too, Jocelyn. I hear these conversations often in different industries. I occasionally have this conversation with my wife about what Black women can do themselves when, they are, when they're not just one Black woman. I mean, there's multiple Black women in a workspace or in an organization. And so what are ways in which they can collaborate and organize? That's a question I see coming up. I had a conversation last week with a panel of Black women college executives, Black women presidents of actual colleges, mostly HBCUs. And one of the women, for her dissertation back in 2012, she did a study on Black women, just the very small number of Black women college presidents, and she talked to them, she interviewed them. At that time, it was like only 40 out of thousands, right? But she was saying one of the things that really affected them that they were really disappointed about was lack of collaboration between themselves, lack of networking, or feeling like they could reach out to the other person. They felt like that wasn't there. Like they felt like, in fact, they felt as if they needed to compete with one another. And so how do we encourage collaborate, regardless of whatever workspace they're in, right? Or whether they're, on a frontline essential worker job or a low wage job, or they're in a high pay, middle class or professional job, how can Black women collaborate in that workplace to make their conditions better?
That's a really wonderful question, because I do think it's incumbent upon all Black women to really push against what I would say the norm. The norm is often in workplaces sort of fend for yourself. If it's good for me and not for other people, that's okay. And I think what we know, particularly for Black women and women generally, is that they do better when they organize. We know this in terms of participation in unions, but even if they're not in a union, just sort of collective organizing and talking to each other, I think, can be helpful. If for no other reason than they get shared experiences. They know if somebody else is encountering the same problem, or is it just them? So I would always encourage Black women to talk to each other, share information, and talk through what do we think could be done to make things better. I think it is important for organizationally for management to talk to staff. They should be in ongoing conversation. So I think Black women are an important piece of the puzzle in terms of really resolving some of what I would call workplace culture and sort of systemic problems. But you can only do that if you see your Black female colleagues as partners and not as competitors. And that is something I think is true at all levels, where whether you're talking about women who are in low-wage jobs or in higher wage jobs. The last thing I would say, though, for all Black women is that you should know your value. We operate in workplaces that have historically, systemically devalued our work, and that has deep roots in our nation, and it continues to this day. And so it is important not only to talk to each other, but to collectively understand what you are worth, and to say to other people, we expect to be paid what we're worth and treated equitably, fairly.
Right. And kind of push back against that notion of, I was reading something recently where, that this kind of recently famed notion of imposter syndrome. We need to push back against that, because it's actually kind of like someone was writing that it's something of a form of violence, of subtle violence against women in the workplace, especially Black women, because you're second guessing and you're doubting yourself. Oh, it's imposter syndrome. No, it's just like it's microaggressions against you, people attempting to devalue your work or use you as the tool to devalue your role in an organization or the work that you put on the table. So I found that to be, I think I was reading it in the Atlantic, or I think it was a Medium. I can't remember the piece, but I just thought it was a very thoughtful piece, because people have been running around and kind of loosely throwing around, oh, I have imposter syndrome. And it's like, no, you don't. Like, you actually do bring a lot of value, especially if you are a Black person in an organization. You are bringing a lot of value. Diversity and Black perspective and Black skill set really does bring tremendous value to an organization.
You're absolutely right. And, the concept of imposter syndrome is premised on a series of inequities that have perpetuated over a lifetime. And so much so that many people internalize these inequities, and they question their own skills, their own strength. And so, it comes across as, well, maybe I can't really do this. Maybe I need to do this job and not that job, or, maybe that's for somebody else. And I think we can't minimize the fact that even, the women who are, most assertive and most confident, nonetheless continue to internalize a system that has spewed a narrative about Black women for decades. And it is hard to overcome that. It's not as simply as just saying it and being confident about it. It is hitting it at many different places, including both individually within women themselves, but also systemically, to really remove the mechanisms through which that devaluation and sometimes dehumanization has occurred, right? Like both have to be tackled, and you don't undo it overnight. That's the sad reality. We have to be conscious of it, but it is a constant process to really push back against a narrative that is so entrenched in our culture about the quality of work from Black women and their capacity.
Yeah, no, it's so important, and it's just as much a psychological battle as it is a public policy and a political, socioeconomic battle. Some real good thoughts and insights from our guest today. We've been talking with Center for American Progress Senior Fellow Jocelyn Fry. You should read that piece if you get a chance. Go to AmericanProgress.org and read that briefing. It's an important one. 10 actions employers can take to secure equal pay for Black women. Go to AmericanProgress.org and search for that. And Jocelyn Fry joining us. I hope we have you back, Jocelyn. A really good conversation. I appreciate this. I feel like we need to have more of that same conversation in another segment. So we'll have you back.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's just great to be here. Thank you for raising these issues.
All right, thank you. All right, take care. Be safe out there. Thanks again.
All righty, bye-bye.
All right, let's take a break. Phone lines are open, back open, as we head into the 12 noon hour. 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Let's take a break and we'll be right back.
We do all we can to ensure our kids are happy, healthy, safe, and strong. Having high-quality, low-cost health insurance helps make that possible. With CHIP, your child can have medical, dental, eye care, and more for free or low cost. Whether you're self-employed, unemployed, or your employee benefits are just too expensive, CHIP is there for you to help your child be strong. CHIP Strong. Apply or renew today at 800-986-KIDS or go to chipcoverspakids.com.
Paid for with Pennsylvania taxpayer dollars.
Just one more step. You got it.
You're doing great. This is the sound of a nationally ranked top rehabilitation hospital, home to the largest collection of robotics in the United States, where we continually exceed patient expectations. Because no injury is too severe or too minor for our care.
There you go.
This is the sound of success. Moss Rehab. Challenge accepted.
Are you looking for a job? Do you have skills in design, engineering, or computer programming? Get ready for Network, a virtual job fair with Technically Media. On Thursday, March 18th from noon to 6 p.m., the employers at Network are looking to learn more than just what's on your resume. Your personality and fit have real weight in the interviews. Technically is a partner of WURD Radio's Livelihood Initiative. Register for Network, the virtual tech job fair taking place on March 18th at WURDworks.com.
Thinking about retirement? Make sure a My Social Security account is a part of your plan. A My Social Security account gives you secure access to your personal earnings history and benefit status. You can find out if you're eligible to receive benefits, compare retirement benefit estimates at different ages or dates, view spousal benefit estimates, and more. Plan for your future. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDradio.com.
All right, the time is now 11:45 and the temperature is 35 degrees in Philadelphia and surrounding areas. And this is being sponsored by Beach Companies. Dr. Ken Scott, president of the Beach Companies, reminds everyone to support Black people and Black Business 365. Please view and download the free 2021 Black Business Directory and Community Resources Directory at beachcompanies.com. And once again, go to beachcompanies.com for more there. 215-634-8065. Toll free, it is 866-361-0900. Phone lines are open at 215-634-8065. Toll free, 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. 215-634-8065. Toll free, it is 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Having conversations this morning about rising violence. We need to continue to have a conversation about rising violence in Philadelphia, but we need to have a conversation about rising violence everywhere. And even folks in Philadelphia who are experiencing that violence firsthand, I think should engage in that conversation and want to promote and encourage a national conversation, because we're not alone in this. All the major urban centers, all the major metro centers in the United States right now are dealing with high rates of violence, and you should put pressure on media organizations. You should put pressure on your community leaders, put pressure on, if you attend a virtual service of a church each week and your preacher is not talking about violence that's racking particularly black communities nationwide, you need to be putting pressure on them to have that conversation and also provide some scriptural guidance on how we tackle that and how we deal with that, because it is happening, and we need to have some context around that conversation as well. I think both David Love and G.S. Potter making some excellent points in our roundtable session about that earlier on. Let me see here. We have Raphael Suleiman, who was making a comment on our Facebook live stream as people are watching, listening in on WURD TV. Raphael Suleiman saying, that is a spot-on observation, Mr. Ellison. If we don't make an attempt to solve the crime problems in Philly and our other cities, we will end up with a 94 crime bill in 2021, or at least before 2022, but we'll get into that in a second. Biden will be the author of both bills. Well, he'll have to sign it. He was there for the first one. Listen to his old speeches on C-SPAN when he crafted the first crime bill. He sounds like another Archie Bunker. So we do suspect, and we do believe, Biden has somewhat evolved or evolved past those views that he was sharing back in the early 90s, particularly, now that he is politically leaning so much on the power of black voters. But Raphael Suleiman is absolutely right. If we don't have an intentional conversation nationally about it, if we don't embrace that our community is going through a national emergency, we're going through pandemic, yes, and we're going through these other issues, but we're also going through this crisis of massive spikes of violence happening inside our communities, particularly in our urban communities. We're going to come up with what's going to happen is you're going to have people responding for us and resurrecting a tough on crime approach. And so we're going to have balanced conversations. We're going to have to put the same energy. I've been saying this, I can't say it enough. We're going to have to put the same energy into all three conversations. Going to have, yes, the conversation on policing reform, because, if you're going to have police in the communities, then police should be doing the job that they're being hired to do, is to keep those communities safe. And so that conversation, we need to have a conversation about, policing reform and overhauling the policing or completely reimagining it. That's one conversation. Put the same, you have that conversation. It's an important conversation. You have a conversation about criminal legal reform or otherwise what's known as criminal justice reform. Okay, we don't want our people being unnecessarily incarcerated in high numbers, or being thrown into these, or being funneled into prisons through a school-to-prison pipeline. So you got to have that conversation too. But aligned with it also on equal terms and with the same equal energy, we have to have a conversation about, okay, what's going on? Where's this violence coming from? Who's doing it? Why are they doing it? Okay, well, how do we invest in these communities to stop this violence from happening? We do have intentional, or the nation will have intentional conversations about, like, oh, why did this, seemingly nice, innocent white guy suddenly arm up and shoot, tens of dozens or hundreds of people at one time? We'll have conversations, get into these deep psychological or psychosocial conversations about, those white men, who are mass shooters. Well, we definitely need to have the deep psychosocial, economic conversations about, brothers who are out there, for example, in the city of Philadelphia, and who are shooting each other or shooting at each other, or committing that level of gun violence, and we need to get to, as both Love and Potter were saying, we need to get into a deep analysis of the conditions of poverty, of food insecurity, of the environment, because that's all leading up to that. And so we need to figure out, okay, well, where do we make the necessary targeted investments to reduce or to massively alleviate the crisis. And that's just not happening. It's not happening on a national level. I know. I have those conversations occasionally on other outlets. I'm having those conversations with other people, with people who are at that level, and it's just, they refuse to bring it up. Let me go to Maurice out of North Philly, who's calling in for a reality check. Maurice?
Good morning, Charles. How's everything?
Hey, good morning. What's happening?
I want to ask you a question. Your caller had called earlier about reparations.
Yeah.
And I want to refer back to Kamala Harris when she made the statement that we're not just going to do something just for black people, but I believe she want to do something intentionally also for Native Americans. Now, the question to that thing is, we talk about reparation for black people in 1619. We also got to talk about black people in 1492.
Yeah.
So they will have to identify those black people also. When they talk about when she said she want to do something for Native Americans, because no one wanted to believe that the original Native Americans was dark-skinned black people.
Mm.
And what we see
You're like, you know, when Christopher Columbus, when he went to the West Indies, to the Caribbean, he found dark-skinned indigenous Caribbean people.
Correct, but not just the Caribbeans. They was all over the Western Hemisphere. That's why if you understand, I tell people, if you understand the infatuation that the Kardashians had with black people, their history from Armenian, they consider black people an Armenian. And if we go back to Yugoslavia, understand the Yugoslavia war, when that war was going on in Kosovo, Serbians against Croatians and Albanians, that was an ethnic cleansing war because they look at those people as being black people. So through their culture, they have something called Indo-European. So when we tell the story about the Indians coming here through the Bering Straits, because they traveled through Europe and through Alaska, into Canada, into the Caribbean, they stopped here into the Americas. But they were black people. So when she's talking about reparations, who are they talking about reparations for? And are we going to identify the black people of 1492 and the black people of 1619?
Let me ask you, I'm real curious, Maurice, just to get your thought on this. So, while we're on reparations and, first it's, having that conversation, that strategic conversation about how, one, a bill like H.R. 40, which is a commission to study the impact of reparations so you can come up with the full receipt, the full price tag of, okay, well, how much does this cost, right? What was the total economic impact? What was the total economic cost of it? So how much is it going to cost? And then second, then passing legislation or passing policy to get reparations. Would you reject, I'm just wondering, I'm just real curious to get your thoughts on this, Maurice. Would you reject a reparations package that would include repayment for indigenous genocide and the exploitation of brown people as well? But you have, so it takes care of like their issues, but it also separately takes care of more specifically black people's issues as well. Like it's this big kind of, it takes care, it gives us reparations too. Would people reject it just because it's like this multicultural, seemingly multifaceted reparations package? Because I think I'm starting to hear bubbles of conversation like that too, because people are trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we get this passed?
That's a good question. What I want to say is the brown people were the black people before the European invasion. Mm-hmm. That was part of the Christopher Columbus and European invasions. They are the biracial of the black people and the Europeans today. Mm-hmm. They are the biracial children. So now I wouldn't be against that as long as you put it in this perspective of who they were. My thing is, I'm glad you put it up because there's a situation, I don't know if you're familiar with what happened at Georgetown University where they caught a white professor making a statement concerning the lack of black grades or ability to function at Georgetown University. She was fired, I believe, yesterday.
Because formerly enslaved folks helped build Georgetown University and also used to live in Georgetown in Washington, D.C. So they actually asked for students to approve a reparations package, like, through the student fees, through the accumulated fees, they will provide scholarships to the descendants of those formerly enslaved.
He was fired Friday, I believe, for making a statement against the black people because she didn't know the history that they took black land from the black people that lived in Georgetown. So all that, when we're looking at land and residual, everything you talk about this morning, even with the record industry, they came out this morning with they want to pay for the past talent that was taken from Little Richard and Bo Diddley. They never got paid for compensation where Elvis Presley took their music and got rich off it. He took their songs and got rich. So when we talking about getting reparations, I'd rather for us to have residual income where we consistently year in and year out get it because American culture is black culture and artifacts.
Yeah.
And that need to be paid for, along with the travesty they did to us. But we need residual income because we have a wealth gap that we can't close as working people.
No, we can't. We got to close it. So we got to figure out that reparations package has to figure out how to close that wealth gap. So, hey, Maurice, I got to let you go because I was running up on time here, running up on a break. So, no, thanks for those thoughts. I appreciate that. It's something to think about. 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900. Prince out of Schuylkill. Hold on 1 second, and we'll take other phone calls after this break.
WURD recognizes Black women innovators and entrepreneurs who are making history every day. Nominate a Black woman-owned business for our Level Up contest. Go to WURDradio.com for more information. Brought to you by Bank of America, Comcast, Keystone First, PICO, Thomas Jefferson University, and Jefferson Health.
It's Women's History Month, and we want to honor Black women authors by helping you level up and read up. Join the Forward movement and get a free copy of a book from one of the most influential Black women today. For a limited time, you can add The Little Book of Big Lies by Tina Lifford, She Came to Slay by Erica Dunbar, Sing Unburied Sing, a novel by Jesmyn Ward, or Acts of Faith by Jan Van Zant to your reading collection. Level up and read up. Go to wordradio.com/join now to join or renew your Forward membership and get your free book today.
In celebration of women, Michelle Obama.
If we want to give all of our children a foundation for their dreams, then we must work like never before.
This is WURD Radio. 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD. Philadelphia. Independent Black Media.
This is WURD Breaking News.
Okay, welcome back. We have breaking news this coming out of Washington, D.C. We have like we have two men being arrested for assaulting Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who died shortly after responding on January 6th to the attacks on the U.S. Capitol. And so two men have been arrested and charged. Finally federal investigators finding them, and they had struggled for weeks to build a federal murder case in Sicknick's death as they were poring over reams and reams of video and photographs, and they were trying to determine the final moment in which he suffered those fatal injuries. And so they determined that these two men were responsible. We've had more than 300 people so far who've been charged in connection with the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol by insurgents, not rioters, insurgents. And that figure could easily pass 400, and that's according to the Department of Justice. Also, charges likely coming against additional members of the group known as Oath Keepers, the armed white nationalist group known as Oath Keepers. And so there's a conspiracy case that's being built up by federal prosecutors. Right now, that has 9 defendants in that case, and that's prosecutors revealing that last week in federal court. So we'll definitely keep an eye on. We see a ratcheting up of federal prosecutions of people involved in the insurgent attack against the U.S., the domestic insurgent attack against the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. So more to come. That's still developing. 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900. Let me go to Prince out of Schuylkill, who's calling for a reality check. Prince.
Hey, Charles, how are you?
Hey, what's happening? All right. Good afternoon.
I think that word is, and there's a biopsychosocial that we need to analyze or take a look at when it comes to individual people. You know, that biography on the environment and what they have accumulated over a period of time that make them think and act and do the things they normally do. I noticed that the prisons pay folks to do those kind of research when they do case management of people, how you got here, what caused you to do what you had done. And so they try to use that as a rehabilitating defense to someone who may have 20 years in prison or or may have been had experienced or have been exposed to some things that the normal child or normal person would not have been exposed to. But I do want to ask you a question. A nonprofit, we're familiar with those, with what a nonprofit does, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So if that is the case, and you look at all these entities that are nonprofits, such as the City of Philadelphia, the school districts, the police departments, the unions, and when there's always these group of people who want to put committees together or groups together to study the cause and not the effect. And that's always been a problem for me, because you can't put a committee together when you already know that these things have to exist in order for these nonprofits to exist. And one of the callers, when he talked about deaf hustlers, he talked about a group. Would there be a group against people getting murdered if there was no murders? No, there wouldn't be no group. And so would there be a collective bargaining agreement if folks didn't live in public housing? No. Would there be a collective bargaining agreement if you didn't have a nonprofit such as the City of Philadelphia and the school district? No. Well, how do I know that? Because some of these school districts, some of these universities in our city, and we have a couple of them, they do outside contractors to do their work, and everything that they have built is not necessarily union. And so we try to put them into a collective bargaining agreement based on a dollar value. So if it's past $5 million, then they have to make a union for the well-being and the safety of mankind and the utilization of people who live inside of the area. I just want to throw that out there because all these groups doesn't mean anything if we don't deal with the core of it. And once again, the thing that happened in Georgetown, I don't want you to give out scholarships. I want you to give out land. I want you to give out opportunity. So don't think that we're not smart enough to own land, but we're smart enough to get educated by a European system so we can continue the construct of a European education. And I'll hang up and I'll listen to you. Thank you for taking my call.
No, it's a key question. So Prince hitting on some good points this afternoon. So let's keep that in mind. Let's continue to have that conversation. Let me take on some more folks before 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900. Because the key, I mean, ultimately is to eradicate violence in the community. That's what we want. We want to eliminate it. We don't want to just reduce it. I mean, I've always said that. That should be the goal. Like, what sort of world, particularly if you're an advocate, if you're an activist in these spaces, what sort of world are you imagining 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? Like, what's that future that you want? So I think Prince is hitting on some fine points there. Let me go to Maurice out of Southwest, calling in for a reality check. Maurice. I think we had him, but we might have lost him. So Maurice, you can call back. Let me go to George out of Center City, coming on for a reality check. George, what's up?
Fine. How you doing, Toronto?
All right. How you doing, sir? All right.
You're doing some real interesting stuff this morning. But, when you say violence, it's that everybody try to push it to somebody else or give people who have no real authority or want people to put their lives in jeopardy, the people who are getting paid to do the job that's not doing the job. So you also got to realize is that over the last 2 years, they have taken a lot of things away from the police where you can't police. A lot of people are supposed to be in jail, but, they're proving a point. They're not locking them up. They do everything they do, and it's like they just ignore it. And the public is arguing about the wrong thing. Be careful who you have in the room, negotiating for you. Be careful who you have in the room talking for you. That's the problem that we have. You had the wrong people. You ever notice, Charles, somebody come up with a solution, it's always a dollar emphasis with it. How much can we get? Our organization needs this. We need more of that. Well, I don't know. I have yet to see anybody out there when all this crap go on. Now it's getting ready to be a big war between blacks and these Russians with these gun joints. There's some guys that's coming home is like not getting a break off, getting sick of this stuff about you running these gun joints through our neighborhoods and we ain't getting no break off, but we got, these young guys you sell them to killing each other. So now the police commissioner don't have no plan for anything. and everybody speaks as though she belongs to a black sorority, speaks as though she's connected with certain people in the city that's connected with a sorority, and she got with a few black people that's got some type of say-so. She thinks that she gets a black card and get a pass, which she is, but she really has a white card and get a pass because, like the mayor told him, you better not say anything about her unless you got something positive to say. Don't criticize her job, you know, because she's doing the best she can with what she got. I mean, that's the way the mayor and all them talk, like, you know, they care less. But you get what you get because, you know why? Every time people see the mayor, they don't never bring it to his attention. When is this woman going to do her job? When are you going to make the police do their job? Nobody asks Kenny anything.
But I mean, is the mayor? But I have to ask this too. Okay, so fair enough. Can I ask this, Georgia? Fair enough. You know, in terms of like, okay, like what specifically is like the police commissioner's plan. But I mean, she's also got to get more guidance, or she's got to get. I mean, the person who sets the tone is the person at the top, the mayor. And I mean, there is that feeling that the mayor is not setting that kind of guidance or tone at the top, like that he's really truly understanding or grasping that this is a real emergency, as a real state of emergency, as a real crisis out there as far as violence is concerned.
In all sincerity, what have I told you from day one? That ain't the problem. There's two problems. 2 people, 3 people really got main serious problems of being disrespected by black people, talked to like their children by black people, and talking real ignoramuses like, you know, to black people. I mean, once those Negroes that was in that room be man enough to go to the mayor, McNesby, and the other 2 whites that was there and say, listen, man, we have the differences, but the city is being torn apart, and we should set out as men.
So I see, I keep going back to that question. So once that conversation is had with, you know, you have like all the chiefs in the room, the mayor, McNesby, the various activists and advocates. So that's when you're saying, that's when finally we could see some semblance of peace in Philadelphia. That's when finally, like,
you've
it's all
been
hands on
around
deck.
long enough to know that this crap can be stopped in a day. If they want to shut this city down with all this violence, they can. They'll shut it down. It ain't no
Well, why
problem.
don't they just do it? Why not do it just now? I mean, it's their city too. That's why I'm having trouble. That's why. No, I understand where you're coming from, George. I mean, you're making a lot of good points. But on that point, that one particular point right there, I still have trouble kind of connecting the dots there. I really do. I genuinely do. No, not disparaging you. I'm just really having trouble because I'm like, well, why not just go ahead and do that now? Like, why are you waiting for people to come into a room with you and sit down and kind of kiss your ring in order to activate you to do that? I mean, this McNesby's city too. It's his city too. So I mean, if it's my hometown and I see my hometown engulfed in violence, I'd be like, okay, you know what? I have the ability to start to trigger or activate my members into action to save my city. You know, I mean, it can't just be we're suddenly all like feeling our hometown when the Eagles win a Super Bowl. It has to be. You understand what I'm saying, George? Like, I'm having trouble understanding that. Why not just do it now?
Charles, you coming from a Texas. You've been in the streets. It ain't like you dumb me down and don't know nothing about the streets. You know, I mean, you was in Philly, Charles. You was in the worst part of the neighborhood. It wasn't like you. Listen, you know what it is to get run home, and you knew what it was to run somebody else home. Stop that, Charles. You're too educated and too smart to be playing on that low level like that. You know exactly what I'm saying.
No, I do know what you're saying, but I do understand what you're saying. I just wonder why it can't be done differently. I mean, is that
the way it's done? Period.
Can it? I'm like, can it change? It can't change.
No, it ain't gonna change.
Oh.
And who's winning? Who's winning so far? They said what they said and they proved it. And remember, nobody in their neighborhood's getting killed. It's our neighborhood's getting killed. Those Negroes who was at the table talking all that gangster tough police stuff, and that fat little white guy came out there and told them, it's going to come a day that you're going to beg us to come in your neighborhood. You know what he did? Put the cigarette in his mouth and lit it up and went downstairs and had a press conference and said the same exact thing. So all that stuff everybody else talking, and be careful who you have in the room negotiating for you. As none of this foolishness going to stop.
I know that has to. I know that level of negotiation has to take place. I'm just. George, I gotta let you go because I gotta let you go because I gotta make sure. No, there's some good points. I have to go to Bree out of Germantown, who's calling in for a reality check. Bree?
Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. I haven't heard the entire conversation, but I just wanted to make a comment that as far as solutions for the violence in Philadelphia, I don't hear too much talk about, I heard a little bit, but I don't think there's enough emphasis on talking about what are some of the early interventions that we can do so that the people, the kids, the young boys and whoever's doing it have more of an opportunity to do something else. And I specifically, when we have everybody coming to the table, is the school district of Philadelphia, K to 12, at the table, are the colleges, community colleges, University of Penn, Drexel, all the colleges. Maybe they need to be at the table, and they need to start offering children at an early age other activities, including trades like home ec, woodshop, carpentry, construction.
Yeah,
all of
I
those
agree.
things. They don't need to wait until they're a teenager and they've given up. They need to start this in 8th grade, 7th grade, at least middle school. And I think everybody needs to buy into it, especially the K-12, community colleges and colleges, to let the kids know and let everybody know that there are some kind of opportunities for them to learn and do some kind of trades. I don't hear enough talk about that, and I think that might be one of the solutions for giving people more inspiration to do something besides shoot each other. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah.
I don't.
No, thank you for that, Bree. No, I appreciate you, and I think there's one thing I'd like to see. I don't know if it's the city. I don't know if it's these and I haven't seen anything like this yet either, Bree, where someone doing a study on the cost of violence in a city like Philadelphia. So if you have 500 people, 3,300 people shot in the city of Philadelphia last year, how much did that cost the city, right? So first, tabulating how much did that cost? X amount of millions of dollars, maybe perhaps it was $1 billion, and lost and accumulated costs. Hospital bills, the trauma response from hospitals, the impact, the economic impact on a family, on a community, lost productivity, from people being traumatized, can't go to work the next day because they got shot, or they had a family member shot, or they had a shooting right outside their house, so they're like, well, I'm not leaving the house, I'm not going to work. There's got to be a price tag to that, right? So that's one. Tabulating that average economic cost, that drain on economic productivity, that drain on Philadelphia GDP. So that's one. And then figuring out, okay, well, if we made an investment of the sort like what Bree just described, how much would that cost? So if, for example, I'm just hypothetical here because I don't know. If, for example, it's costing Philadelphia, the city of Philadelphia, $2 billion a year, the violence, $2 billion in lost economic productivity a year. Let's just say that, so many hundreds of people being murdered and so many thousands of people being shot over the period of a year. But it costs, I don't know, $500 million to just make direct investments in those communities and direct investments in a wide variety of initiatives and programs and direct economic assistance, to people who are most affected by that violence or who are most likely to commit that violence. So you see where I'm at? I want to see that, that cost-benefit analysis. Okay, it actually benefits you more. You actually, by spending less than the cost of violence, the actual full-figure cost of violence in Philadelphia, you're actually saving money. I think we need to get into that conversation because that's the, once again, I don't have rose-colored glasses about this. I know that many public officials, well, no, not public, let's leave them out of it, but what Bree was saying, those different institutions and companies that do business in Philadelphia, they don't care about the moral aspect of this conversation. We have to start talking about it in terms of okay, how is this impacting their bottom line? We have to stop being altruistic about it. And like, what do they gain out of it? What's in it for them to eliminate violence in the city of Philadelphia? We need to start having like a sort of business, because that's where kind of Bree was headed just now, a business-oriented, a cost-driven conversation. Maybe that's what we need to start doing. Like putting that, it's the same thing with the reparations debate and conversation. Like, I don't see that figure, that dollar, that price tag. Like, how much are you saying this costs, right? And maybe if we have something of a glimpse of that through like the report that Citibank, no doubt, did last year, where they were saying, hey, you know what? Over the past decade, racism has cost U.S. GDP $16 trillion, right? That's nearly like the full GDP of the American economy. And if like we eradicated racism overnight, that would be an immediate infusion of $5 trillion into the American economy, like that immediately. We need to have that kind of conversation in Philadelphia. Then where you can start getting, folks like the greater Philadelphia Business Chamber of Commerce on board to finally start, helping kind of figure this out. I have not seen that study yet. Maybe I'm missing something there. Let me go to Stanley out of North Philly, who's calling in for a reality check. Stanley?
Yeah, Charles, good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Listen, I'm calling because I know words paint pictures and words have power behind them. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I'm calling, Brother Charles, two things. Number one is Sister Movita just lost her second son to murder. Dorothy Spike lost her son to murder. Every murder is real. Amir and my son. And these are people in the community that's doing work from the muscle. And the reason why I call, not so much to get in debate with people, but we have to be very careful that when we saying words like death hustling and stuff like that, there is people who I know that is doing work, Charles, because of the seriousness of not wanting this to happen to another family. And if you're going to use that terminology, please use it and distinguish who you're talking about. Because when people see us doing work and we trying to get people to support us, if they buy into that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree with that, Mr. Stanley. I do. It is choice words. I probably, you know what, I don't use that word. You haven't heard me use that word, but I think that when people call in, you know what, I'll say this. Mr. Stanley, when people call in, I'm going to be a lot more intentional about that because I know what you're talking about, who you're talking about, who uses words like that. We shouldn't be getting into name calling. You can disagree with people on their approach, but you're absolutely right, Mr. Stanley, and I'm going to take personal responsibility for that and start kind of policing that. I'm more than happy to have people disagree with people's specific approaches on how they tackle violent crime, because then we can try to figure out, like, okay, well, what's the best possible path to a solution? That disagreement is fine. But yeah, the name calling, I agree with you, Mr. Stanley. I think people who call in really need to be very careful about. I don't personally engage in name calling, but folks who do call in, talking about people who are trying to tackle this problem, really shouldn't be name calling folks outside their name. Like, don't use their name at all if you're going to do that. But go ahead, Mr. Stanley. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because my point is, Brother Charles, is we've been working all the time, man, hitting the streets, trying to do the best we can with what we got. And if that thought is permeating into the psyche of the people that might help us, they won't come and support us because their perception is we out here hustling death. And that's a very distracting, very demeaning, and very something we don't need right now. We need to encourage people to come and be a part of this effort and not use terminology that get people discouraged because they think we're trying to get something, and that's not what we're doing at all. We're trying to help bring solutions and things. Also, to your point about the city controller, Rebecca Reinhardt, did a cost analysis on the violence that's taking place, and she has a very in-depth report on that. On that, and also that's right. Yeah, I need to visit that. Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Stanley. I forgot about that. But go ahead. And also, what I would like to say to people who want to come, we doing the cleanup at 1200, and instead of getting on the radio, demeaning work, come over there this Saturday at 10 o'clock and help us clean up a community. That's what makes a difference, and that puts us out there in the community where we can really engage these young brothers because they see us doing something constructive and productive. Career has lost 2 of his sons to murder, and he's still out here trying to help and do stuff. So I say all this to say that, Brother Charles, we're going to do the work irregardless, but we need supportive information and not unsupportive information, because our people get enough of that beaten down. We have to say things and do things to lift our people up, and not egotistically, but and not for no self-serving, self-grandizement. We need help, and the help that we need is boots on the ground and come out and put some physical work in. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, we have a mediation committee. We need help with mediation. The sister called. A couple of our members was Johnny on the spot, 8 o'clock in the morning, because the sister called out for some help. That's the type of stuff we need, Brother Charles.
That's what we do. You're right. You're absolutely right, Mr. Stanley. I appreciate that. So I'm going to keep this conversation in mind, which you just called me about just now. And so just, be on notice. I agree with that. I think that to earlier points, Mr. Stanley, I think that, yes, I think we should have a conversation about, okay, well, what's the approach and strategy that's being used now, even by, folks or organizations or groups that are on the ground tackling it. Okay, well, what are the strengths in those strategies? What are maybe some of the weaknesses in those strategies, and kind of having an open conversation about that? Okay, well, but, all with the purpose of how do we help various organizations and various advocates on the ground in the trenches, how do we help them make their approach more effective, right? Because that's the help you need. So, and what are more resources or resources in targeted areas that we need? You're absolutely right, too. I forgot about that report on the economic impact of homicides, Office of the Controller. That came out in 2019, October 2019. And City Controller Rebecca Reinhardt did that report, and she's also mapping violence as well. We need to have a conversation, bring her back on soon, to revisit some of that analysis and and see how expansive it is. I'm going to reread that because I totally forgot about that. But I appreciate you raising that, Mr. Stanley. I think that, if we're going to have disagreements and conversation about, different ways of seeing approaches to tackling violence, there shouldn't be any name calling it. It's already enough pain as is, with so many people dying and so many people getting maimed by violence. So the hurt's already there. You don't need to add to the hurt with calling people like specific names or political names, or calling them. No, just let's just see, okay, well, how can we make this situation better? All right, let me take a break. When we come back on the other side, we have Dr. Nicolette Lewis-Saint. She's coming up next here on Reality Check. Also, don't forget about the Level Up 2021 contest. We're celebrating Women's History Month with the 2021 Level Up contest. We're embarking on a 3-city contest highlighting Black women-owned businesses who are making a difference in their community. So nominate yourself or another favorite Black woman-owned business and enter to win a marketing campaign that's valued at $5,000. And the deadline for submissions is being extended to March 19th. Go to wordradio.com, WURDradio.com for more information there. Let's take a break, and we'll be right back.
Attention WURD audience, do you know that you can get help with your PICO energy bill? PICO is here to help you with financial help through various assistance programs, including the PICO CAP program, which provides a monthly credit for eligible low-income customers based on the customer's total household gross income and energy usage. If you are experiencing financial hardship, you may qualify for the PICO CAP program.
And PICO Cares is the customer assistance and referral evaluation service designed to assist special needs, low-income customers who have a temporary personal or financial hardship that prevents the payment of your PICO energy bill. If you have a special needs child or adult in your care, your household may qualify for the CARES program.
Call 1-800-774-7040 today to see if you qualify due to an existing situation or a change in circumstances within your household. Call 1-800-774-7040 today for more information on the PICO CAP or PICO CARES program. PICO, powering our communities.
Want the latest in WURD swag? Check out the shop tab on WURDradio.com. Hoodies, tees, and more in a variety of colors. The shop tab on WURDradio.com. Show the world that you're all about black. Talk media. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDradio.com.
Okay, Nicolette Lewis-Saint is Executive Director of Healthcare Ready. Go to healthcareready.org for more information. She joins us every couple of weeks here on Reality Check, WURD. If you have questions, especially related to pandemic and emergency preparedness, emergency health issues, 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900. You know what? I meant to talk to you about vaccines and pandemic, and I will shortly in about a moment, Nicolette. But there's been a very prominent conversation happening on these airwaves, particularly today, but it happens every day, about violence. And I just wondered if, like, you as in the emergency health, emergency management, emergency preparedness community, if you're noticing and you're responding to or trying to figure out a plan to respond to these spikes in violent crime that are happening everywhere, whether it's Philly or Baltimore or DC, New York, LA. I mean, it's really bad, and people are saying they haven't seen this level of violence since the early 90s, since what we saw back then, and we know what happened back then after that point. So there are a lot of people obviously getting very concerned about the lack of a kind of a national urgent plan to that, or if we do come up with one, it'll be the wrong kind of plan.
Right. A crime plan, and maybe not looking at the social determinants that are underlying the violence, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I have seen some recent conversations, as recent as this weekend, really talking through what concerns there are as it relates to how the impacts of the pandemic are manifesting. Some of this is being seen as directly connected to the pandemic, whether it be related to stay-at-home orders and the downside of that very necessary public health action, the economic outcomes from the pandemic, a lot of people losing jobs, increased stress and inability to have clear outlets for that stress. So just recognizing that there are a lot of determinants. I think you're seeing the public health community take that up, recognizing that if we're to manage this well and not see as you mentioned, the wrong kind of approach, it is going to require a public health view. I think it is rare but necessary to think about how we do this at the national level. Oftentimes we'll see either public health as a discipline, kind of leading the charge, but then really it becomes up to jurisdictions, much like other things we often talk about, to determine what they're going to do in their city, in their state. And I do think a national level discussion makes a lot of sense right now. Also thinking about how we manage the other side of COVID, which is the unrelated trauma and grief related to COVID, and how we can address some of that and what that means for the types of violence that we're seeing and the hurt that a lot of communities are suffering from.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think too many of the conversations, that's one of the things that we were talking about and lamenting a bit, is this lack of an urgent national conversation. Like, the same way we do with, for example, reimagining police or criminal justice reform. Like, we're not having like a big, because the pain is there. Like in Philly, 500 people murdered last year, 3,300 people shot. And it's already, we've reached 100 in 2021 who've been murdered. And I know in Baltimore, where you are, it's bad. DC, it's bad, like especially east of the river. And it seems like there's folks are kind of afraid. I notice, at least on the national level, like kind of this collective, and really, I'll be frank, with Black community conversation about like, hey, y'all, like, we're going to do anything about this? People seem to avoid it.
Yeah, I think, and I think there are some reasons for that. I think one is, we are looking at Philly and New York and DC and Miami. I think Miami is another big one, but it is difficult to separate that conversation and not just make it about Black people are the problem. And I think there's some framing stuff that we've got to work through.
Yeah, we do.
I also wonder about who carries the banner on that, and I think that's a problem for when we think about national leadership. And even if there's a space for national level policy change, is this a public health conversation? Is this a criminal justice conversation? Is this specifically about safeguarding Black communities? And and I think depending on how we determine where the center of the conversation should be, it changes who owns it, and I think that's a part of what makes it difficult too.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So, Doc, I'm glad I asked you about that, we need to. We'll continue to talk more about it. We're talking with Dr. Nicolette Lewis Saint. She's Executive Director of HealthcareReady.org. or healthcareready.org for more information. Real quick, Nicolette, before we talk on, let me go to Mamie out of University City. She did have a question for you here during our Healthcare Ready segment. Mamie, how are you doing?
I'm okay. How are you, Brother Charles and Dr. St. John, is it?
Nicolette Lewis Saint.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
To get a verification on this Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Okay.
Is it just one shot, one time, or is this over a period of years? How does that work? Are you familiar with it, Doctor?
Yes, ma'am. It is one shot, one time. And it will, so the rule is after you complete your doses, however many doses you have your one shot for the Johnson & Johnson. 14 days later, you will be fully inoculated or vaccinated. So you only have to go and get one shot. And then 14 days after you get that one shot, you know that you are fully protected against COVID.
Thank you so much. And Charles,
you're welcome.
So much for all you do. Is there something else I need to know, Doctor?
Sure. One thing I would be mindful of is that as time goes on, we're learning more about COVID, and the expectation is that at some point we'll need booster shots. So in a year or two, you may need a booster, and that could be because the virus is mutating. It could be just to make sure that your immunity sustains. But we don't have, the science is still being determined right now. We don't have that data yet. So right now, what we know is that once you get that one shot, 14 days later, you'll be fully immunized. And as the guidance changes, we'll make sure we tell you.
Thank you so much. Have a blessed day. And thank you, Charles, for always bringing on these geniuses.
Thank you, Ms. May. We try. Yeah, we try. We aim to please here. So, yeah, we try to bring the smart folks here on this show. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you calling in and listening in too, Ms. Mamie. Talking more about those vaccines, we're talking more about pandemic response too, Nicolette. We do have this issue of, it's two things that are worrying me right now. Florida spring breakers, right, and a little bit of Texas too, and the red states like Florida, Texas, and elsewhere, like they're lifting their mask mandates. I'm just trying to wrap my head around, like, why are we doing this? And then, and it's not just the red states either. I mean, there are places where I haven't been dining inside a restaurant, but every now and then you pick up takeout, and went to a restaurant in another county to pick up a neighboring counties right across the way to pick up just doing some quick pizza, and the restaurant was crowded. And people were like, most people had their mask on, but at the tables, of course, they did. I was just shocked. I was stunned to see so many people just crowded up in a restaurant.
Like nothing ever happened. Yeah. Right. So one of the things that it's important to remember is that the reason that the dining restrictions in particular were in place, and I think, Baltimore City Mayor said it best, you can't eat with a mask on, right? That's what it comes down to. So seeing a lot of these states, in Maryland lifting restrictions but keeping the mask mandate in place, but again, you lift dining restrictions, but people are in close proximity with their masks off because they're eating, still problematic. Texas and Florida removing mask mandates. And I think there's a sense that, we're tired of the pandemic. We're tired of having to comply with these orders. Things seem to be stabilizing. People are starting to get vaccinated. So let's just go ahead and move on. I think that's the rationale. It is dangerous. And I think you've seen a lot of public health experts come out against it pretty sharply, recognizing that we still have less than 25% of the population fully vaccinated against COVID. It might be less than 10% right now. So the idea that we are in this space where even taking this kind of a risk is reasonable is dangerous. And it really puts another burden down on those local jurisdictions because, like you'll see in Maryland and I think Texas is trying to grapple with this. What happens when the governor puts out an order and then the county judge or the mayor says that's not right for us? Then how do they continue to engage the business community and protect public health? So it puts them in a tough position too.
Yeah, no, it really does. I wonder about it. I worry about it. Like, I don't understand why people just can't wait so we get to, like...
Because not everyone's used to waiting. And the idea
no,
of having to, take these measures and wait in the interest of public health seems like a massive imposition.
It really does. Let me go to, real quick, Nicolette, Ada out of Westmount area, who's calling in for our conversation, our healthcare ready conversation with Dr. Lewis Saint. Ada, how are you doing?
Fine. How are you, Charles? Thank you for taking my call. Thank you, doctor. I had two questions. The first one is about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. There was some rumors going around that, please clear this up for me because I have not gotten vaccinated yet. I'm the type of person that wait until all the dust settles and get more information.
Understood.
Yeah. Is there any variance in reference to the vaccine being from aborted fetuses? And also, Charles, the gentleman that spoke about the boots on the ground, I think it's at 12th and Huntington. I'd like some information about the time for that so that I can get involved with that if you have that at some point.
I think it was Mr. Stanley out of North Philly. I should have asked him for more information. If Mr. Stanley is still tuning in, if he can, or if someone can call in and relay that information. I'm sorry about that, Ms. Ada. I don't have that.
That's okay. Maybe I can find out some other way. But those are my questions, and thank you very much for taking my call. I do appreciate you both.
All right. Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Nicolette.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you for asking that question. I know it's been on the minds of many, and I think there have been some parts of the Christian community that have really been asking these questions and making this point. So I really appreciate you asking. So the answer is that the cell lines that were used to help develop the vaccine originally about 40 years ago were derived from embryonic stem cells. And so what that means is that from some aborted tissue, those cells were originally harvested. So when I say 30 or 40 years ago, what that means is that these cell lines have replicated truly tens of thousands of times over before we got to the cells that we're using now. So it's not a clear answer. It's not enough for me to say yes or no, but it is to say 40 years ago, that is where they were harvested from, and they are certainly not the same cells that those were, and and it also is important as a researcher to point out that is that is a very personal question to determine your comfort, but to understand that that tissue was remaining and the harvest was done in compliance with the law. But that those are two separate decisions. There was, again, 40 years ago, I believe these samples were pulled in the late 60s, early 70s, and then the cell lines came from that. So if you were to actually look at the cell lines that were used for the development, they would be genetically different. So that describes how different they are now, but where they originally were harvested from was from fetal tissue.
Yeah, the Johnson & Johnson, they've had issued a statement not too long ago about that. They were saying there is no fetal tissue in our one-shot Janssen COVID-19 vaccine. It's an inactivated, non-infective adenovirus vector, which codes for the coronavirus spikes protein. We were able to manufacture hundreds of millions of doses using our engineered cell line system that enables the rapid production of new viral vaccines to combat dangerous infectious diseases. And someone from Johns Hopkins, Dr. Amesh Adalia, is saying here that what happens is they grow the virus through these cells, then they harvest the virus, filter all of that material, which you get in your vaccine is actually the virus that's been engineered. But there is no fetal tissue in the in the vaccine itself.
Right. And Amesh is right. I've heard this as two different questions. One being, was the research that informed the development of the vaccine using samples? And so I was speaking to that. And then the other question is, does the vaccine itself have it? And so I wanted to kind of speak to both of those and just say that is where the original cell line came from, and 40 years later, the engineered cell system that they create, and it's truly an engineered system that allows for them to be able to produce the content of that vaccine in a way that can allow them to make 100 million vaccine doses that we critically need right now. But there is no additional tissue or no remnants that is actually in that dose. That
is why science class is important.
It is. It is.
Because we do learn these things in basic science class.
Right.
But a lot of people either forget those lessons or they're not getting those kinds of lessons in their dysfunctional public school systems. But anyway, that's another conversation. But yeah, science is important.
It's important, and I think what happens is because some of this stuff is complicated. When you talk about a cell line, I've had a lot of people ask me about like HeLa cells, which are the cells that come from Henrietta Lacks, and all of the contributions that she has made. When we talk about cell lines, we've really never had that conversation in general discourse ever before, and so this is where understanding science can actually help understand like where your values align. And I know that's been the way the rumor or the misinformation has been spreading, has been about a values issue of what it means to have aborted fetal tissue in a vaccine. And that's why I think it's so important to have opportunities to answer questions like here.
Yeah, it really is really important. That's why we bring you on. We've been talking with Dr. Nicolette Lewis-Saint. She's at DRN Lewis-Saint on Twitter, on social media. You can engage her there or find out more information on the group she leads, healthcareready.org. Nicolette, got to let you go, but please be safe out there. Always a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, take care. Okay, let's take a break, and we'll just wrap up this Monday edition with open phones at 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900. Let's take a break.
COVID-19 has highlighted the need for digital equity and internet adoption programs. Comcast's Internet Essentials program is designed to connect families to low-cost, high-speed internet and laptops so students can be ready for anything. Since 2011, Comcast has connected 4 million students from low-income families to the internet through its Internet Essentials program. Learn more about how Internet Essentials is connecting students.
Hello, entrepreneurs, especially if you're in the food delivery space. CBD is one of the fastest growing health and wellness categories out today. And as it is now legal, you can expand your customer base and increase revenues per ticket by using this as a specialty food offering. CBDmealsdelivered.com is now for sale and would be a perfect website to integrate with your existing food delivery website. Thank you.
The Black Words Book Club.
WURD Radio's new monthly conversation on books that explore the African American experience through social, economic, and environmental justice issues. Tune in the second Tuesday of every month on Evening Words with Nick Taliaferro, 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. For April, WURD Radio is partnering with the Free Library of Philadelphia and showcasing their pick for its annual citywide reading program, One Book, One Philadelphia, entitled The Tradition by Jericho Brown. Be sure to listen live as Nick Taliaferro will hold a contest for a giveaway book bundle that consists of 4 titles from Kensington's Defina's Authors of Color's newest release. Don't miss it. Tuesday, April 13th on Evening Words with Nick Taliaferro. Attention for WURD members. Get your copy and receive a 20% discount when you purchase at Harriet's Bookstore or Hakeem's Bookstore. For more information on the Black Words Book Club, visit wordradio.com. The Black Words Book Club is sponsored by Defina. Defina is an imprint of Kensington Publishing Corporation, America's independent publisher, concentrating on authors of color.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and wordradio.com.
All right, welcome back. 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900. As we wrap up this Monday edition of Reality. It's been a busy Monday edition as well. Also, WURD Radio celebrating Women's History Month with our 2021 Level Up contest. So you want to join this 3-city contest, Philly, LA, Chicago, partnering up with our brethren, sister stations at WVON in Chicago, Fine Station, and KGLA in Los Angeles as well. We'll be highlighting Black women-owned businesses who are making a difference in their communities. Nominate yourself or your favorite Black women-owned business and enter to win a marketing campaign that is valued at $5,000. The deadline for submissions has now been extended to March 19th, this Friday, March 19th. So still got some time to get your submissions in. Lots of comments also on the Facebook Live. Comment section. People watching us on WURD TV at facebook.com/4word. Derek Ramsey saying, good afternoon, Charles. I believe the surge in violence around the country is a COINTELPRO program in response to the uprising around the country. So as Derek Ramsey saying that. Thanks for that thought. So something to think about. Cynthia Logan, Black Male Community Council. Okay, thanks for that information, Cynthia. But Black Male Community Council, Stanley Crawford, 4300 Germantown Ave. I failed to get his phone number, so yeah, we don't have a phone number for him, but we know he's the Black Male Community Council. We need some more specific information if anybody wants to call in about that. He did say there was this activity, the event we're going to be doing cleanup this weekend, and so cleaning up trash. You know how I feel about that. That's one of those simple, very inexpensive things that you can do to reduce violence. Junior Lee, I did miss this question, but I'll ask it later on Twitter, see what she says. What does the doctor think about going to an NCAA game in a huge arena and limited capacity? She probably would advise, I could hear the answer on that now. She would advise against it. So she's just like, she's of the same kind of mind that I am, but most people aren't listening. It's just like, wait till the thing's done. Wait till everybody gets to like that full sort of immunization point, even that the president was setting last week, where he was saying, hey, by July 4th, we'll be able to we'll still have to socially distance a little bit and still be responsible, probably mask up, but, we can ease up a bit if by July 4th. His goal is to, I'll have, the needed threshold of Americans being inoculated or immunized, so we can do these things. So we're almost there, but we could go back. We could actually go back. We may have to extend the pandemic more because people want to continue to do things like crowd up in restaurants, want to take their mask off, and do all sorts of silly things like that in the middle of a pandemic. So, the president can set all the goals that he wants, but if it's not a collective, and that's why I'm glad. I was actually encouraged by that last week in the speech, the address he gave last week, where he saw it as a we needed a collective approach. We need to act as a community on this. JR out of Cheltenham is calling in for a reality check. JR?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Or good afternoon. How are you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry. Good afternoon, sir. Yeah, I'm an elder recuperating from a lot of challenges with my health, so you have to forgive me for my kind of disorientation with the morning and afternoon. So.
No, it's okay. That's all right. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. No, please. Feel better.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate your show, and I appreciate you for what you do for the community. So there's been a couple comments, a couple of people calling in about the situation with the violence. Recently, a neighbor of mine lost her son to some unknown cause of violence, and I'm a I guess survivor of the '60s with the gang war. My brother almost got killed in 1968. It was about 2 weeks after Dr. King was assassinated. My brother almost got killed in this gang war. The situation back then was so much, different. It wasn't the drugs so much as it was just turf, wars. Guys was going down to different neighborhoods and seeing girls, and they would resent it. And then you have a turf war, and people were getting killed. Shaka Fatah's mother, Sister Fatah, and David Fatah, they were instrumental, along with Benny Swan, a whole group of people that got together. Dave Richardson up here was very instrumental in removing the turf wars. But Charles, it's all about education. I mean, it's all about getting, at the root of the problem. OIC, Dr. Sullivan, he had a great program, and I just want to, I know I spoke to you earlier, and we just need to get those kind of programs, with the schools having, the education and the alternatives, so that they don't fall into, this mentality of not having hope, and that's always what Dr. Sullivan was doing, to give them hope, with the OIC training, and that gave them the opportunity. It starts in the schools with the education, is the solution, Charles, and not to harp on it, but it's been done, and we know that it's us, against them, and they don't want to educate our children, and OIC was ripped of its strength, right now it's been narrowed down to maybe only like a couple courses, I think. But that was the solution then, and along with the community, we can do better, man.
Yeah, we really can. We really can. JR, I appreciate your thoughts on that. Feel better, but you're absolutely right. You got to make those direct investments, and those direct investments actually cost. That's the thing, right? Those direct investments, which prevent the root causes of gun violence or just violence in general in Philly, those direct investments cost much less than the cost of the violence itself. So, for example, like this Department of Public Health made this. They had studied the economic burden of homicides in Philadelphia. So they were looking at 2017. Well, first of all, they came up with, on average, a firearm homicide is associated with an estimated $1.42 million in costs due to medical expenses, lost earnings, productivity, property damage, and criminal justice costs. That's just one homicide. One homicide costs, scattered across like all the various expenses, costs over $1 million. So last year, if you had 500 homicides, that's over $500 million. That's basically, if it's 1.42 million, that's like 600 million. That's more than $500 million in lost economic productivity or an economic burden to the city of Philadelphia. But when you look at sort of the direct investments that you could make, and doing some creative things. I mean, folks are more willing to talk about like reparations and direct payments to folks nationally through like a reparations package. We need to start talking about, like in places like Philadelphia, direct payments or direct investments, monetary investments to, for example, young people who are likely to be victims of that violence or to commit that violence. Let's talk about that. And the cost of that is probably going to be cheaper than the accumulated cost of homicides. And that's just the accumulated cost of a homicide. What's the cost for someone who's been shot? So is that like is that $500,000, right? Because, you get shot, but you haven't died. But, I mean, these are just like, so if you throw that in there, you got more money. I don't see that cost. Oh, here we go. This is 2017. The 2,205 non-fatal firearm assaults in 2017 alone cost Philadelphia more than $102.8 million. So, I mean, there you have it. And, they were looking at 2017 at that time. They had already $476.6 million of economic burden. You need to think about it in terms of that. Like we need to get those numbers. And so I'll just look at this and read this a little bit more during this afternoon and tonight, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about it tomorrow and drill down on it. That wraps this Monday edition of Reality Check. The Source with Andrea Lawful Sanders is coming up next, so stay tuned in here at WURD. I'm Charles Ellison. I'm at Ellison Report on Twitter.com, #RealityCheck. And check out that B-Note. Go to the bnote.com. Check out that latest piece by Dr. G.S. Potter, The Beginning of the End of Civil Rights. It's a very important piece, so I highly recommend. Maybe we can talk about that too. All right, everyone. Have a great Monday. God willing, I'll see you tomorrow, Tuesday. And please stay sharp, stay smart, but more importantly, stay safe out there.